Hey guys, tonight we're curling up under the thickest, heaviest quilt your imagination can muster and diving into what it was really like to try and get some sleep. Yes, sleep. During one of the deadliest winters in American history, the Great Blizzards of 1888. Honestly, you probably won't survive this, but that's part of the charm, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. Also, I'm curious, what city are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So, you're a parent in 1887, and life's simple but full. You've got a few kids, maybe more than a few, and you live somewhere out on the prairie. Nebraska, Kansas, the Dakotas. Not a lot of trees, not a lot of neighbours, but the skies stretch wide above you, and when the stars are out, it's like sleeping under the dome of some enormous, quiet cathedral. Winter's coming, and yeah, winters are always rough here, but nothing you haven't handled before. You've patched the roof, stacked wood by the back door, butchered the hog, hung your smoked meats. Life's in motion. Your home? Likely a sod house, unless you're lucky enough to have wood nearby. Sod homes are made from blocks of earth, literal chunks of grassland cut and stacked into walls, sometimes 2 feet thick. They're surprisingly cosy, especially in winter, but also a little claustrophobic. No insulation beyond the dirt itself, maybe a few blankets nailed over windows, which are more like holes with glass panes jammed in. Your floors might be dirt too. When you walk, it's like soft clumping across a dry riverbed. When you sleep all together. Not just because it's nice, but because it's necessary. The heat from bodies is the difference between frostbite and a good night's rest. One big bed for the parents, and the kids might pile in too, or curl up on makeshift mattresses, straw-stuffed ticks laid out on the floor, with quilts you've mended so many times they're more patch than fabric. No pyjamas, by the way. Just long underwear if you're lucky, and maybe a knit cap to keep the heat from escaping through your scalp. You fall asleep to the sounds of the house settling, the faint hiss of wind squeezing through every crack, and the rhythmic creak of the stovepipe if you're blessed with a good fire going. If you're unlucky, you fall asleep knowing the wind will wake you, icy and sharp, maybe dragging a corner of the roof up with it. Now, historically, by December of 1887, the winter is already shaping up to be different, a little meaner. The first snow comes early, the air smells metallic. Folks who've lived here their whole lives start saying things like, "Feels like it'll be a bad one." You feel it too. A pressure behind the eyes, a tightness in your chest when the wind shifts. There's no weather forecast, no Doppler radar. Maybe a newspaper 3 days old that guesses what's coming. But mostly, you rely on instinct. And your animals. Horses get jittery before a big one. Chickens refuse to leave the coop. Dogs whine at night for no clear reason. And then, bam! January 12th, 1888. You wake up early that day. It's weirdly warm. The kind of eerie warmth that shouldn't exist in January. You step outside and feel it. Soft, melting snow underfoot. It smells like thaw. Your kids are excited. They might even go to school today. You let them. The air feels almost spring-like. Then, before lunch, everything changes. The temperature drops more than 60 degrees in just a few hours. The wind whips in with a sound you've never heard before. Part howl, part scream. The snow isn't fluffy, it's needles. Tiny crystallized daggers flying sideways, turning the entire world into a blinding white wall. You're lucky, you're home. You weren't in the barn or halfway to town, or walking the kids to school when the storm hit. That luck is the only reason you're not already buried. Now here's your first historical fact. During the Schoolhouse Blizzard, January 12th, 1888, Temperatures dropped so fast that many people caught outside didn't make it back. Hundreds died. Many of them school children walking home in whiteout conditions. It wasn't just cold, it was savage. And the fringe fact. Some survivors reported that the snow, driven by hurricane-force winds, could literally peel paint off buildings. That's how sharp and fast it came. A few said it even sandblasted chickens bald. Weird? Definitely. Possibly exaggerated? Sure. But that's folklore for you. Born out of fear and frost. Now, you're huddled in your sod home. It's dark because windows are crusted in snow. It's noisy because the wind rattles everything like a banshee trying to claw its way in. You've blocked every seam with rags. The stove's working for now, but the fuel pile is dwindling fast. You're already wondering how long this will last. You feed the fire with whatever's nearby, sticks, dried dung, even pieces of broken furniture. You pile the kids under the heaviest quilts you have. Not individually, they're stacked together. They sleep side by side, 3 or 4 to a tick mattress like a litter of puppies. You tuck in the sides so no air leaks under the covers. You even put a blanket over their heads, leaving just a gap for breathing. Now the scholarly debate. Some historians argue that frontier families were so accustomed to hardship that they barely noticed the difference during the storm. Others disagree, suggesting this particular blizzard introduced a level of cold and chaos that deeply traumatized even the hardier settlers. Diaries from the time are inconsistent. Some sound stoic, others verge on shell-shocked. You feel the panic creeping just under the surface. You smile for the kids, you sing to them as they shiver. But you don't sleep much that night. You listen, you monitor the fire, you count heads under the blankets. You think of your neighbours. Are they okay? Did the McAllisters make it back from town? You doze in short bursts. Each time you open your eyes, it's darker. The kind of darkness that feels like it might have weight. And outside, the blizzard screams. And just like that, the longest night begins. Morning, if you can call it that, comes without sunlight. There's no cheerful golden glow poking through the windows, just a dull grey, maybe a bit of blue, leaking in through snow-packed glass. You open your eyes to see your breath hanging in the air, drifting in delicate curls that vanish just inches from your face. For a second you think, maybe the storm's past, maybe it's over. Then the wind howls again, pressing against the house like a living thing. It sounds angry now, mean. You can hear the sharp scrape of snow against wood. The blizzard hasn't stopped. It just paused to take a deeper breath. You wiggle your toes. They're still there, barely. Cold, yes, but not black or blistered. Not yet. That's good news. Your kids start to stir, poking their heads out from under quilts, faces red and puffy with cold. The little one's nose is crusted in snot. The older one complains that his feet feel like glass. You try to laugh it off, crack a joke. It lands flat. You have no idea what time it is. That day, January 12th, will go down in history as the start of the Schoolhouse Blizzard. And if you're living in the Midwest right now, say, the Dakota Territory, Nebraska, Kansas, or Minnesota, you are in the thick of it. Here's your historical fact. This blizzard was so sudden and so vicious that people reported visibility dropping from miles to inches in under 5 minutes. One moment, it was almost warm. The next, a total whiteout. People could see the barn 1 second and be lost on their way to it the next. It happened that fast. Now let's talk about the people who didn't make it home in time, or who made it almost home. Imagine this. You live 3 miles outside of town. You've gone in for supplies. Flour, sugar, maybe a bolt of fabric. You're halfway back in your wagon when the sky turns. The wind kicks up. You push the horses harder, but within minutes the trail is gone. Everything's gone. It's just swirling white, like standing inside a snow globe someone keeps shaking. And when that happens, people do the strangest things. Some lie down in the snow thinking they're near home. Some keep walking in circles until they collapse. And others, very few, dig into haystacks or crawl under overturned wagons and wait. Let's zoom in on one of those families. A man named Jonas Parks, his wife May, and their daughter Lila were returning from town in their buggy when the storm caught them. They made it to within half a mile of their homestead. Half a mile. But Jonas couldn't see the barn. May was crying, more from fear than cold. Lila had gone silent. So Jonas did something strange. He told May to stay with the buggy while he walked ahead to find the house. He thought it was just over the next rise. He never came back. May, half frozen, wrapped Lila in the horse blanket and climbed under the buggy. They were found there 2 days later, both frostbitten, but alive. The horses hadn't made it. And Jonas, they found him in spring less than 300 feet from his front door. He'd missed it by a matter of steps. Fringe fact. A few survivors in Minnesota swore the snow carried voices with it, muffled shouts, sometimes their own names, whispered back at them through the storm. Scientists chalk this up to disoriented acoustics and stress-induced hallucinations. But hey, maybe the prairie talks when it's angry. Back to your house! You've managed to keep the fire alive overnight, but just barely. You burned through half the woodpile already, and the storm shows no signs of letting up. You throw on your coat and brace yourself to go outside for more. You open the door and immediately regret it. The snow has drifted up above the doorframe. You push, but it doesn't budge. You're snowed in. This is where the panic creeps in. Not all at once, just little pinches behind your ribs. You tell yourself you've got enough wood for another day, maybe 2. You tell yourself you've been through worse. You tell yourself the snow will melt. But it's hard to believe it when even the dog won't leave its corner by the stove. That night, sleep comes harder. The wind is louder, or maybe you're just listening more. The kids are cold and cranky. You try rotating their spots, putting the coldest ones closer to the stove, turning them like loaves in an oven. You give them molasses if you have it, quick sugar for the body to burn. Some families even make a bed stew of sorts. Mix hot water with a pinch of salt and drink it down before bundling up. Not tasty, but it keeps you warm longer than you'd think. Now here's the scholarly debate of the night. Was the Schoolhouse Blizzard truly sudden, or did people just ignore the warning signs? Some experts argue that there were indicators, barometric shifts, animal behaviour, cloud patterns. But the lack of forecasting tools meant even seasoned farmers got caught off guard. Others think the storm was freakish, an atmospheric anomaly that defied preparation, a kind of once-in-a-century white beast that broke all the rules. Your job now? Keep the family warm. That's it. That's the whole mission. You huddle together again, pulling the quilts higher, listening to the house creak and groan. Somewhere in the distance something crashes. Could be a tree limb, could be part of the roof. You don't go check. Instead, you lie there, half awake, holding your breath, wondering if the snow will come in next. You imagine the next morning. What if it's just more of the same? What if the roof gives in? What if the food runs out before the storm does? And yet, despite it all, you fall asleep eventually. Not because you're safe, but because you're tired. So tired. The cold wears you down like sandpaper. Sleep doesn't come like a gentle wave. It drops on you like a heavy damp curtain. In your dreams, it's summer again. The wheat sways, the sky's full of birds, and you wake up to the sound of the wind still screaming at your door. You're not sure how many days have passed now, maybe 2, maybe 3. Time, in a snowstorm, is less about hours and more about tasks. Feeding the fire, melting snow for water, checking on the children's feet to make sure they're not going blue. That's how you measure things. A new rhythm. A colder, slower rhythm. You're wearing the same clothes you slept in. Layers on layers. The coat you used to keep clean for Sunday church is now your sleeping robe, your pillow, your winter armour. Everyone stinks a little. No one cares. Cleanliness doesn't even rank right now. Warmth, food, survival, that's the whole list. Now, outside, the storm's still roaring. If you press your ear to the wall, it sounds like the inside of a cave full of wolves. Low moaning, high-pitched whines, even the occasional thud. The wind is throwing things now. Somewhere out there, a shutter has torn loose and keeps slapping the side of the house like a warning bell. You're not opening that door again, not until you're sure it won't bury you alive. You've dug a little trench in the snow blocking the windows, just enough to let a sliver of light in. The house, buried to its eaves, looks like a lump in the earth. You hope it's not drawing attention. Not that there's anyone around to notice. Just drifts and ghost snow and maybe a few terrified birds hunkered down in bushes, if they didn't already freeze mid-flight. And speaking of snow, here's your historical fact. In parts of Nebraska and the Dakota Territory, the snowdrifts during the 1888 storm reached up to 15 feet high. That's taller than most of the homes they swallowed. Whole towns disappeared for days, trains vanished, telegraph poles snapped, cows wandered into the snow and never wandered out. Now picture this. A man named Elijah Mercer, just a regular farmer near O'Neill, Nebraska, climbed out his second-story window 3 days after the storm started and walked directly onto a snowbank. That's how high it had piled up. He described it like walking across a frozen ocean. Flat, white, endless. Silent. Back in your house, it's that silence you start to notice now. A different kind. The kind that sets in once your ears stop ringing from the wind. The quiet of exhaustion. Your kids are half asleep, lying in a tangle of quilts. You've pulled furniture closer to the fire just to keep everyone in the same warm orbit. Chairs, boxes, even an upside-down wash tub someone's using as a footstool. You're watching the fire like it's a living thing. You talk to it under your breath, beg it not to die. You feed it sticks like crumbs to a wild animal. It crackles weakly, flickering against the black walls, and you swear if it starts to go out, your heart rate drops with it. By now, food is more about planning than eating. You're rationing. Bread's gone. Salt pork's down to a nub. You've got a bit of cornmeal, maybe a dried apple or two, and you're melting snow on the stove for water. Not clean water, not flavourful, but wet. And that's what matters. And now the strange fringe fact of the night. Some folks, especially kids, became snowblind during the blizzard. Not just from being outside, but from the light bouncing off every surface inside once the snow packed against the house. It reflected through the windows, under doors, even through the smoke hole if you didn't block it. People thought they were going mad, seeing lights that weren't there or feeling watched. One man in Minnesota swore the snow was watching him breathe. You get it? Because right now, lying there on your straw tick mattress, cocooned in every blanket you own, you feel that too, like the snow is pressing in, listening. You fall asleep for a little while. You must. Because suddenly it's darker and someone's shaking your shoulder. It's your oldest boy. He's scared. He had a nightmare. Said the wind was whispering someone's name. It might have been his, or maybe yours. You hold him, whisper soft nonsense, and settle him back under the quilt. The other kids haven't even stirred. This is the part no one writes about in the papers. The raw parts. The parents pretending. The little kids who cry quietly into their sleeves so they don't wake anyone. The teenage girl who stares at the ceiling for hours because she's too afraid to blink. There's a scholarly debate around what happened inside these homes, whether it brought families closer together or scarred them forever. Some say frontier resilience kicked in. Others argue that being trapped in such a confined, dark space, in constant cold, left a mark people didn't talk about afterward. Kind of like trench trauma, but with snow instead of mud. You're starting to believe both could be true. That night someone starts snoring, too loudly. The dog growls in his sleep. Someone else coughs, long and wet, and you listen, heart pounding, wondering if it's the start of something worse. Pneumonia. That silent killer that shows up uninvited in cold places like this. But there's no doctor, not for miles, and even if there was, he's not getting through 6 feet of snow and wind that could strip skin off bone. So you do what you've done every night since the storm started. You wrap your arms around someone, child, spouse, whoever's closest, and you go still. You breathe, in and out, count the breaths. Try not to think about what's above you, a ceiling creaking under the weight of 1,000 tons of snow. Try not to think about what's outside of you either, because it's still there. You can hear it, like the sky itself is cracking open, a little more with each gust, and you think, if the wind doesn't break the house, maybe morning will. Maybe. You're jolted awake by something that doesn't belong, a silence too deep, too sudden. After days of relentless howling, it's just stopped. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring because they've forgotten how to do nothing. At first you're afraid you've gone deaf. You sit up, wrapped in a cocoon of stiff blankets, rubbing your arms and blinking into the dim grey light leaking around the window cracks. The fire's burned down to glowing embers. You throw a few sticks on and blow gently, watching the orange flickers catch and swell. The warmth stretches its fingers back out, and the shadows pull away like curtains. The kids are still sleeping, one drooling into a pillow that's really just a bundled coat, another curled up with the dog, their fingers tangled in its fur. They didn't wake. That's good. They need the rest. You've lost track of how many hours you've all spent huddled like this. It's not even sleep anymore. It's a kind of drifting, a half-awareness where dreams blur into waking thoughts and back again. Now, here's your historical fact. In many places during the 1888 blizzards, it wasn't the snow that killed, it was the aftermath. Once the wind stopped, the temperature dropped even lower. With the sky cleared, heat radiated upward and vanished. It got colder than before. The world turned into a frozen tomb. People, thinking the worst was over, stepped outside to assess the damage and froze. Bodies were found just feet from doorsteps, half-dressed, shoes untied. They thought the silence meant safety. It didn't. You remember that. You're not rushing out. Instead, you check the window. Carefully. The snow has crusted over, forming a glittering white shell across the world. It looks like cake icing, smooth and undisturbed. Beautiful, in the way something deadly can be. No movement, no sign of life. You begin digging. Not a full expedition, just a careful clearing of the door so you can get outside if you need to. The snow is hard now, wind-packed and icy. You wedge it loose in blocks, stacking them beside you. With every scoop, cold air seeps in and curls around your ankles like a warning. Eventually you open the door and step out. It's like walking on another planet. The sky's blue, bright, but nothing's warm. The sunlight reflects off every surface, blinding. Your breath turns instantly solid, clouding your vision. You can see your roof, just the chimney and a slope of snow where the peak should be. Everything else is gone, underneath. You start to hear it now, faint scattered sounds, a hammer clinking, a voice yelling, the crack of wood breaking under weight. Other survivors surfacing just like you, climbing out of white graves. Fringe fact of the night. In some parts of the Midwest, kids spent the day after the blizzard sledding off rooftops. That's how high the drifts were. One boy in Iowa built a snow tunnel that stretched the length of his street, complete with candlelit alcoves and a snow mailbox. Morbid? Maybe. But also incredibly human. The way people find play in the wreckage. You head back inside. You haven't seen any neighbours yet, just heard hints of them. But you know the moment is coming when someone's going to need help. A roof's collapsed. A cow's gone missing. Someone's kid didn't make it home. But for now, you focus on your family. You warm what's left of the stew, just a few spoonfuls. but it's hot and savoury, and the smell alone lifts spirits. You split it among the kids, and they eat in slow, reverent silence. Even the dog licks the pot clean. You make a mental list of what you've got left. Maybe 2 days of wood, not much food, no medicine. But you're alive. You don't go back to bed tonight, you can't. Your body's too alert, too stiff. Your muscles feel like they've been wound into ropes, and your back aches from sleeping on the floor. The bed's damp from shared breath and sweat. The mattress sagging in the middle like it's given up. So you take the time to reset. Hang quilts to dry by the fire. Repack the tick mattress with fresh straw if you've got any. Even replace the pillow stuffing with crumpled paper for a bit of fluff. It's not much, but it's better than lying awake in a cold, soggy bundle. Here's where the scholarly debate kicks in. Historians argue whether these families actually slept during blizzards like this. Some say no, not really. They dozed in shifts, always half listening, half ready to move. Others suggest the body eventually gives in, exhaustion overcoming even the cold. Diaries from the time are split. Some describe dreamless nights, others say they didn't close their eyes at all. It likely varied home to home. In your case? You try to sleep that night, but sleep is skittish. It comes in waves, never stays long. You drift for 20 minutes, then wake with a start. Every noise feels like the start of something. Another storm, a crack in the wall, a cry from a child. At one point the baby wakes up screaming. Just a nightmare, but you all wake with her, startled and breathing hard, eyes darting toward the door like it's about to burst open. You rock her until she quiets, whispering nonsense to fill the dark. Eventually the fire burns low. Again. You lie back down, this time under fewer quilts because the night's not quite as bitter as before. Or maybe your body's gone numb to it. Hard to tell. You listen to the small sounds, the shifting of blankets, the occasional cough, the dog's paws twitching in sleep as he chases something warmer in his dreams. Outside the snow settles. You close your eyes. Not because you're safe now, but because for tonight at least you're still here. By the time the sun climbs into the sky the next morning, if you can even call it climbing, it's barely distinguishable from the haze. Just a weak, colourless light pushing its way through the frost on your windows. But it's enough to let you know one thing. The wind has finally stopped. Truly stopped. No gusts rattling the stovepipe. No moans threading through the roof beams. Just stillness, and your own breath fogging up the inside of the glass. You stretch slowly, painfully. Every joint feels older. Your neck is stiff from the way you curled yourself around the little ones. You'd give just about anything for a hot bath, or coffee, or a pillow that isn't stuffed with last year's newspaper, but instead, you make the morning fire. You do it with quiet hands the way someone might mend a broken fence or dress a wound. Deliberate, focused. You stack kindling, whispering a little to yourself. No one else is up yet, not even the dog. You strike the flint. Once, twice, a third time. Finally it catches. The flame snakes upward, licking at the sides of the iron stove, crackling like it's happy to be alive too. And just like that, the cold inside starts to back off. Here's your historical fact. During the blizzards of 1888, many families who survived did so not because they were well prepared, but because they adapted fast. Wood stoves, despite being efficient, were never meant to heat entire families for days on end in homes with no insulation. So people got creative, hanging quilts as interior walls, burning old furniture, sleeping in shifts to conserve body heat. Some even dragged hay bales inside, using them as both insulation and beds. And that's exactly what you're doing now, building the fortress. You nail up extra blankets across the room to create a smaller, warmer sleep chamber around the stove. You push the furniture close. It looks like something out of a child's imagination. Chairs forming barricades, quilts hung like castle walls, the stove glowing like a flickering watchtower. You hand the kids their morning ration, a bit of cornbread crumbled into warm water, maybe a sliver of jerky if you're lucky. It's not about filling them up, it's about giving their little body something to burn. Calories mean heat. Your fringe fact. Some prairie families slept with hot bricks wrapped in cloth at the foot of the bed. Others went more rustic. One Minnesota diary mentions using a freshly butchered pig as a heat source, not eating it, just lying beside it while it cooled overnight. Say what you will, but when survival's on the line, rules start to bend. Now you're thinking about what comes next. The snow has stopped, but you're not fooled. This isn't over. You still need more wood, more water. Maybe, if you're brave, contact with the outside world. You've seen no one, heard nothing but a few sounds in the wind, and that silence is starting to itch. So you start preparing for a supply run. Not a trip to town. No, that would be suicidal right now. You're aiming for something closer. The chicken coop, the shed, the pile of firewood on the far side of the house. It might as well be a mile away. You layer up. 3 pairs of socks, a wool sweater, 2 coats, one of which is patched in 20 places and smells faintly of lard. Mittens, scarf, hat. You wrap a towel around your face until only your eyes show. Then you tie a rope to your waist, loop the other end to the doorknob and step into the white. The snow is higher than your hips. You have to crawl, literally crawl. You look ridiculous, like a bundled up turtle trying to swim through whipped cream. But it's the only way to move without sinking or flipping into a drift you can't get out of. You make it to the wood pile, barely. It's half buried, the top log's crusted in ice. You chip at it with a hatchet until your arms ache. Then you load your sled, a wooden crate you tied to a feed bag strap, and crawl back toward the house, tugging it behind you like a sled dog with back problems. You're sweating under all the layers, but the second you step back inside, it starts to freeze on your skin. You didn't stay out long, maybe 20 minutes, but you're shaking, hands numb, nose burning. It takes the rest of the morning to feel your fingers again, and here comes the scholarly debate. Many accounts of the 1888 blizzards describe sudden, dangerous temperature swings. Some survivors claimed it would feel tolerable one minute, and then become deadly cold the next, like someone threw open a door to the Arctic. Meteorologists argue over whether these were true microbursts of temperature, or just the perception of exhausted, frightened people. You're siding with the survivors. That night sleep becomes something sacred. You've managed to warm the house a bit more, and everyone can finally lie down without shaking. You tuck in the kids. They don't even resist. They're beyond tired. Deeply, heavily tired in that way only cold weather can make you. You know that sleep is dangerous when it's too deep, when the body forgets to shiver, but they're warm now. You made sure of it. You lie down last. You always do. The floor is hard, but the fire's alive, and that's what matters. You keep your boots on this time, just in case, and you stare up at the ceiling, that familiar wooden underside of the roof now covered in frost at the edges. It glitters in the firelight. You trace the lines in the wood grain with your eyes like constellations. You remember a story your grandmother used to tell, something about snow spirits that watched from the roof beams and kept a tally of the warm hearts below. If they liked you, they let spring come early. If they didn't, well, better keep another log on the fire. You smile a little. Then sleep takes you, like a slow, heavy tide rolling over your body, pulling you under just far enough to forget the wind. Outside, the world has frozen still. Inside, you're a warm breath in the belly of a storm. You wake to a strange sensation, quiet. Not silence like before, not the deep, frozen hush of snow-draped fear, but a lighter quiet, the kind that holds possibility. The air feels thinner, less heavy. The frost on the inside of the window isn't creeping as far down the pane, and the fire, it's still glowing, still alive. That alone feels like a miracle. You shift under the covers. Every bone in your body pops and cracks like a bowl of old floorboards. The straw tick has moulded itself to your shape after so many nights. Your back protests as you sit up. Your breath still clouds the air, but not as thick, not as desperate. Then you hear it. The sound of boots crunching on snow. Not yours, not your spouse's, someone else. You freeze. Everyone else is still asleep. You stare at the door. Another crunch. Then, knocking. Soft but unmistakable. You stagger to your feet, every nerve in your body catching fire. You undo the latch, heart hammering, and crack the door. It's your neighbour. Face red from the cold, scarf frozen stiff over his beard, eyes wide with what could either be relief or trauma, maybe both. He just nods. You nod back. That's how you know it's over. Not the whole thing, of course. The blizzard's gone, yes, but now comes the aftermath, the digging, the counting, the news trickling in, piece by awful piece. But for now, you open the door wider, and your neighbour steps inside, bringing a blast of cold with him and a whiff of livestock and wet wool. He removes his mittens slowly, almost ceremonially. "We made it," he says, and you see that his hands are swollen, fingertips raw and pale. His nose is bleeding a little. He doesn't mention it. Here's your historical fact. After the Schoolhouse Blizzard in January 1888, the true death toll wasn't known for weeks. Entire homesteads were discovered only once the snow began to melt. Some families were never found at all, just traces, like a sled half buried in a drift, or a trail of footprints that led nowhere. The final toll was estimated around 235 lives, many of them children caught walking home from school when the sky turned white. You set out what you have, a tin of beans, a piece of salt pork, some dried apples, and share breakfast like it's a feast. No one says it, but the unspoken question hangs between you. Who else made it? The neighbour doesn't know. He came to check on you first. He'd heard chopping, your trip to the woodpile, and decided that meant someone was alive over here. Figured if I could hear someone, I should go toward the sound. You nod again, the weight of his words settling over you. That's how it worked out here. No telephones, no telegraphs in the middle of nowhere. Just gut instinct and the occasional miracle. Fringe fact of the day. One family in North Dakota survived by sealing themselves inside their root cellar. They had potatoes, onions, a few jars of preserves, and not much else. But the earth kept them insulated. They stayed underground for 4 days. When they finally emerged, their house had been flattened by wind and snow. Their entire property looked like a blank page. You don't envy them, but at the same time, maybe they had the right idea. Once your neighbour leaves to check on the next house down the line, you decide it's time to do the same. The kids are wrapped in blankets, now half awake, chewing on bits of breakfast. You tell them to stay put. They nod, wide-eyed. No arguments. They've learned something in these days, that winter isn't pretty, or even just unpleasant. It's dangerous. A character in its own right. A moody, unpredictable villain that wears white and walks on wind. You suit up again. The same ritual. Double socks, mittens over gloves, the towel across the face. You're tired of the layers, of the weight. But you're also not interested in freezing to death 5 steps from home. The sky's still pale, but it's clear. The sun, for once, doesn't feel like a trick. You move through the snow more easily today. It's packed now, less powder, more crust. You can almost walk on top of it if you step carefully. You visit the McCarthy's place first. They're alive, pale, shaken. One of the kids with frostbite on 3 toes, but alive. Then the Halloways. They were stuck in their barn with the livestock, slept on hay, shared body heat with the cows. They smell awful and look proud. You hear stories. One boy, trying to get home from school, crawled into a hollow tree trunk and waited there 2 nights. Lost a few fingers, but survived. One woman gave birth during the storm, right on her kitchen floor, wrapped in shawls, using boiled water and a carving knife she'd cleaned with liquor. The baby lived. So did she. Frontier strength, they call it. Or stubbornness. Honestly, what's the difference? Scholars have argued whether people were prepared for blizzards like this. After all, they lived on the prairie, they knew winter, but many agree that no one was truly prepared for this. The suddenness, the violence, the ferocity of the wind that not only buried homes but twisted trees and tore roofs clean off. Some say the settlers were arrogant, building too far from towns, too confident in their isolation. Others argue that the problem wasn't arrogance but necessity. Land was cheap. Families needed space. Isolation wasn't a choice. It was a condition of survival. You head back home as the light begins to fade again. It's not long before night creeps in. The days are short this time of year, especially after a storm. But the mood inside your little sod house is different tonight. You've survived the worst. You still have no idea what the road ahead looks like, when the next storm might hit, what the thaw will reveal. But tonight, the fire is strong. The kids are warm. And for the first time in days, your sleep isn't a desperate collapse into unconsciousness. It's almost peaceful. You tuck yourself back under the quilts, the dog curled at your feet, the wind quiet outside. Your muscles still ache, your boots are still damp, and you're already dreading the chores tomorrow. But for now, you close your eyes, not in fear, just in rest. You wake in that delicate space between night and morning, when the air is cold enough to nip but no longer bites. The frost on the inside of the window is thinned to spiderweb patterns, curling like smoke across the glass. Outside it's quiet, truly quiet. No wind, no crashing icicles, no neighbours trudging past your door to check on livestock or retrieve what's left of a chicken coop. Just silence, the kind you remember from before the storm. You sit up slowly, trying not to disturb the bundle of warmth beside you. Two of the kids are still curled against your back, sleeping hard, their little bodies twitching with dreams. You listen. You wait. Nothing breaks the stillness. Not even the dog is snoring. And then, something rare. The great white silence. It presses around your house like a blanket, muting the world. Not empty, not lifeless, just soft, as if the land itself is catching its breath. Here's your historical fact for the morning. Survivors of the 1888 blizzards often describe the eerie, post-storm quiet as the most haunting part. After the chaos, the screaming wind, the flying snow, the howling animals, what followed was stillness so deep that it made people uncomfortable. You could hear your own heart. Your breath sounded too loud. One Nebraska woman wrote that it felt like the earth had stopped moving. And she wasn't alone. You step outside, careful not to slam the door. The snow beneath your boots crunches lightly, a sound sharp enough to echo. Everything is smooth now, smoothed by days of whipping wind. Fences are buried, tree branches etched white with frost, the world sculpted into curves and crests like a marble landscape. And up above, blue, a pale, washed-out blue sky that stretches forever. Not a cloud, not a breeze, not a single crow overhead, just cold sun and silence. It's the first time since the blizzard that you really see your land again, even if most of it's still under 10 feet of snow. You walk slowly around your house. The snow has drifted into wild shapes, curved ridges, wind-carved hollows, places where the landscape has become abstract. You spot one of the chickens, barely alive, huddled under a bent milk crate that somehow didn't get blown away. It blinks at you like it's not sure you're real. You bring it inside, wrap it in a sack and place it near the stove. You're not even sure it'll make it, but right now anything warm and breathing is worth saving. Fringe fact of the day: after the Great Blizzard of March 1888, the one that hit the East Coast, some New York City residents claim they could hear the sounds of horse hooves echoing through the snow even from blocks away. The snow had piled so high and packed so tight that it amplified vibrations underground. There were stories of people shouting into sewer grates and having their voices travel for entire city blocks. Sound, in snow, does strange things. Back in your home, the kids are stirring. You tell them to listen, and they do. And for a moment nobody speaks, not even the dog barks. You all just listen to the strange hush that's settled over the world, and then someone laughs. A real laugh. A kid laugh. It's small and sudden and kind of confused, but it's there. And like clockwork, someone else giggles. And then you can't help but smile, even if it pulls at the dry skin of your lips. It's not joy. Not yet. But it's the first flicker. You eat what's left of yesterday's meal, reheated and watery. There's some jerky and a few potatoes in the bin you'd nearly forgotten. The apples are shriveled, but still edible. You plan a meal in your head and don't say it out loud, because the rule now is you never say what you have, only what you need. Then comes the big job. You dig, not just a narrow path to the shed this time. You dig out. You start carving back the yard, pushing the snow away from the windows, uncovering the root cellar, checking the barn door for damage. The kids help where they can, scooping with pots, boots, their bare hands. You assign them to snow tunnel duty, making paths tall enough for walking, wide enough for hauling wood. You find things buried under the snow, a ladder, a half-frozen coil of a rope, the laundry you left on the line 4 days ago, stiff as iron. Each object you dig out feels like a memory being recovered. And here's the scholarly debate of the day. Historians have long argued whether the post-blizzard silence described in letters and journals was a literal quiet, or an emotional one. Was the land truly so still? Or did the trauma simply mute everything else for a while? Were families too stunned, too exhausted to notice anything but the absence of screaming? Either way, it stuck with people. One journal entry from a Kansas settler reads, "I remember that Sunday. I opened the door and felt like I had stepped into the grave of the world. Not because of death, but because of the stillness. That night you sleep again. But this time, you lie on your back and listen to nothing. And it's strange. For the first few minutes, you miss the wind, the white noise of survival. Now there's just quiet. And quiet, oddly enough, is harder to sleep in. There's no sound to drown out the thoughts, and you have a lot of thoughts. You wonder how many others are lying awake right now, staring at their ceilings, thinking the same thing. We made it through that. Somehow. You wonder if your neighbours are okay. You wonder if you should have gone farther today, check the schoolhouse, check the widow Jenkins out by the creek. But your body said no. Your hands still shake when you're not thinking about it. And when the firewood creaks in the stove, you still jump just a little. You close your eyes and see snow. In your dreams, you're back in it. Wandering, always wandering. You're barefoot this time, and you keep seeing your home in the distance but never quite reaching it. When you wake, your cheeks are wet, not sweat. But your kids are sleeping peacefully, tucked into their quilt mountain. The fire is still burning. The silence is still soft. And the world, though battered, is still turning. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake up stiff and twisted like someone packed you in a trunk overnight. The house smells like burned ash and damp wool. One of the kids is drooling on your arm. The fire's burned low again. Just a few glowing coals and a charred log that still gives off a faint crackle when you lean in close. You roll out from under the blankets, careful not to wake anyone. Your knees protest. Your lower back threatens mutiny. But you move anyway. You have to. If you don't feed the fire now, you'll all wake up to frost creeping back across the walls like it owns the place. You toss in some kindling, a few of the better logs from yesterday's haul. You breathe on it, gently. It catches, and you exhale a little triumph along with the smoke. Then it hits you, that smell. You freeze. It's subtle, but unmistakable. Wet wood, smoke, and something else. Something wrong. You step back and look up. The ceiling above the stove is sagging, darker than before. Moisture drips from a corner. Not water, melt. You know that smell. Wet timber that's been under snow too long, now starting to soften and sag. And right above that, the roof. You grab your boots and your coat so fast you nearly trip. By the time you get outside, you're already sweating, heart pounding. The snow has shifted overnight. The weight of it, all that silent pressure, has slouched forward against the roof like a tired giant taking a seat. The centre beam is bending, not by much, but enough to make your stomach drop. And then it hits you, the night the roof might not hold. Here's your historical fact. Many homes during the blizzards of 1888 collapsed under the weight of the snow, but not during the storm itself. No, after. Days later. That's when the structure had time to sag, joints to loosen, moisture to seep in. It wasn't the drama of the blizzard that brought the house down. It was the slow, quiet weight of survival. You scramble to clear snow off the roof. You use a spade, your hands, anything you can find. The snow is heavy and crusted over, like trying to lift blocks of icy concrete. It doesn't help that you're on the roof itself, trying not to fall through it while digging it out. Each shove of snow makes the whole place groan beneath you. You whisper apologies to the house like it's a wounded animal. Come on, just a little more. Stay with me. Fringe fact, in some towns, people dug out rooftop windows just to vent smoke because their actual chimneys had disappeared under the drifts. There are stories of families crawling onto their roofs, building a small fire up there and huddling around it like mountain goats. One man in Wyoming supposedly spent 3 nights sleeping on the roof with a shotgun to protect his chickens, which had taken shelter in the eaves. You're not there yet, but the thought doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. You finish clearing just enough snow to ease the weight. When you climb back down, your legs are shaking and your gloves are soaked through. You strip off the outer layers and hang them by the fire, which now hisses happily at full strength. The ceiling still looks damp but no longer sagging. Close call. You make a mental note. Don't trust the roof. Not yet. Not until everything hardens or melts. You spend the rest of the day bracing the inside, wood planks from the shed, crates, even the old headboard from your broken bed, anything that might help hold the roof if it gives way. It feels a bit like preparing for a second storm, but quieter, slower, more personal. And here's the scholarly debate for the day. Historians often disagree on how much structural damage the great blizzards caused to frontier homes. Some argue that sod houses were better suited for snow, insulated, low to the ground, naturally reinforced by the earth. Others claim they were death traps. If the roof collapsed, it didn't just fall in, it buried you. Logs and boards offered better protection, but they required upkeep, and settlers rarely had the time, tools, or lumber to do it properly. Your house? Somewhere in between, still standing, but not invincible. As night creeps in, you settle into your usual routine. Blankets, layers, a meal of desperation, thinned out stew made from the last of the potatoes and a bit of bone broth. You saved a single biscuit from before the storm and split it 5 ways. The kids don't even ask for more. That's how you know they understand now. They've seen it, lived it, the kind of education no school ever teaches. You hear a creak above. Everyone goes still. Then, nothing. Just the house shifting in its sleep. You glance up at the beams you reinforced earlier. They hold. For now. But no one sleeps easily tonight. Not because it's colder, but because now you've seen the fragility of it all. Not just people, homes, the walls, the ceilings, the things you counted on to keep the world out. You lie there, listening, not to the wind, but to the absence of it. And in that absence, every sound becomes sharper. A mouse in the corner, a drip from the roof, the flutter of a page in an old book no one's touched in weeks. And you wonder what it would sound like if the roof gave in. Would it be fast? Would you have time to move? To grab the kids? Would it be loud? Or would the snow just pour in, soft as silk, smothering everything? You tighten your hold on the little ones. Press your face into the crook of your arm. Try to think of anything else. The prairie in spring, the smell of lilacs, the sound of frogs waking up in the creek, a hot bath, a real bed. Sleep comes in brief flickers. 1 hour, maybe 2. Long enough to dream, short enough to still feel the fear when you wake. And all night long you pray the ceiling doesn't come down. Not yet. You wake with your heart already racing. Not from a noise, just instinct. That primal whisper at the base of your skull saying, check the roof. You sit up slowly, feeling the crackle in your spine, the stiffness of too many nights on too little cushion. The fire's down again, just red glowing embers tucked into a mound of ash, but it's still going. You feed it some kindling, hear the soft whoosh as the flames wake up, and then silence. You look up, still there, still whole, damp, stained, but holding. You let out a breath you hadn't realised you'd been holding since midnight. The others are still sleeping, scattered around the stove like fallen dolls, each of them cocooned in their own pile of patchwork and worn-out quilts. You've started to think of them as embers too, glowing shapes in the dimness, radiating heat, flickering with each dream and turn. You pull on your boots, still stiff from yesterday's melting snow, and open the door to check the barn. And that's when you hear it. Low, rhythmic, wet but familiar, mooing, faint but insistent. You stumble outside and crunch through the snow toward the barn, adrenaline pushing past the aches. You didn't check on the animals yesterday. You couldn't. Too much roof, too much wood, too little light. And honestly, you didn't want to see what wasn't there. But now, the barn still stands, lopsided and bowed under snow but standing. You dig out the door, kick it open, and there, blinking back at you through straw and steam and breath that curls like ghosts in the air, 3 cows, 1 goat, and a chicken with an icicle on its tail. You laugh, out loud. A ragged, sudden sound that startles even you. One of the cows lowly moos in return like it's trying to match your tone. You laugh again, harder, until you're bent over your knees, wiping your eyes, and wondering how in the world anything survived. Here's your historical fact. Livestock losses during the 1888 blizzards were catastrophic in some areas. Entire herds were buried under drifts, or suffocated when barns collapsed. But in other cases, animals survived by sheer dumb luck, trapped in enclosed spaces, huddled for warmth, or shielded by haystacks. There are reports of cows being dug out alive after 4 or 5 days underground, weak but breathing. And now you get it. You feel it. You haul over a bucket, break the ice in the trough, and fill it with water you hauled in from the melt barrel. There's not much feed left, but you spread it thin. They eat like kings. You scratch one of the cows behind the ears and she closes her eyes like she's just stepped into spring. You stay there longer than you need to, partly because it's warm from all the body heat, and partly because it feels safe. A little womb of straw and breath and animal sounds. No ceiling threatening to collapse. No cold fingers creeping down your neck. Eventually you go back inside, clothes smelling like barn, hands raw, but heart steadier. The kids are awake now, stretching and groaning and rubbing sleep from their eyes. You surprise them with milk, lukewarm, almost gritty, but real. From your cow. You've never seen them drink anything so fast. Then you break the news. The animals made it. They cheer. The littlest claps her mitten hands together and says she's going to thank the goat personally. No one objects. Fringe fact? Some families during the blizzards literally slept with their animals. Not in the same house, in the barn, especially families with newborns or the sick. The animal's body heat made the difference between frostbite and survival. One story from Iowa tells of a woman who laid her baby between 2 sheep for 3 nights. The baby made it. So did the sheep, and the woman, later, named her son after both. You don't go that far, but you do let the kids take blankets out to the barn and visit while you make a plan. Because it's clear now, the worst may have passed, but winter hasn't. Not by a long shot. More snow is coming, maybe not like that, but enough to matter, and you're low on food, lower on wood, and there's still no word from town. You take stock of your supplies again, with clearer eyes. You've got 2 sacks of potatoes with more sprouts than eyes, half a jar of lard, a tin of flour that tastes faintly of kerosene, a dried ham bone that's been boiled twice already, some beans if you're willing to spend the fuel cooking them, and, miracle of miracles, 3 eggs. It's not hopeless, but it's close. And here comes the scholarly debate of the day. Did families like yours overwinter well, or did they suffer silently and just not record it? Diaries from the 1880s are full of stoicism. We made do, we stayed strong, the Lord provided. But what does that mean? Were people really that tough, or just that quiet? Historians argue about whether we romanticize pioneer grit or underestimate the trauma they bottled up. You have your own theory. Nobody was prepared. They just survived. Barely, and not without scars. That night you cook the beans anyway. You let them soak. Let them boil slow. The house smells rich for the first time in days. You crack the eggs into the pan and scramble them with the last of the salt. You watch every bite go into your kids' mouths like you're watching gold vanish. You don't eat until everyone else is done, and when you do, you take your time. Outside the wind hasn't returned, but the quiet now feels different. Not empty, just still. Sleep comes easier tonight. The ceiling groans like always. The stove ticks. Someone breathes too loudly, and the dog twitches in his sleep chasing rabbits or enemies or who knows what. And you close your eyes, full stomach, roof still standing, cow in the barn. You're starting to believe you might just make it through this. The next morning you wake up with something unusual on your face. Sunlight. Not just the cold, silvery kind that trickles in like a guilty ghost, but real, honest sunlight. Golden, soft, and hitting your cheek at just the right angle to be irritating in the best way. It doesn't feel warm yet, but it's a signal, a message from the sky. You're still here, and maybe so am I. You sit up slowly, blinking at the light leaking through the frost-edged window. The house is quiet in a different way today. Not survival quiet, but post-chaos quiet. The kind that almost feels like peace, or at least a truce. The fire's burned low again, but that's okay. You have a system now. One of the kids stirs from the pile of quilts, makes a groggy sound, and thumps their leg over the dog, who doesn't seem to mind. You throw on your coat and boots and step outside, not because you have to, but because you want to. The snow glitters. It doesn't sparkle. Let's not romanticize it. It glitters. Like tiny knives. The sun bounces off every surface and stabs your eyes, and even through the numbness of winter fatigue, it feels oddly satisfying. Like the land is flexing its muscles again, showing off what it can do when it's not actively trying to kill you. You walk to the barn again, check on the animals. The cow gives you a half-hearted moo. The goat, who has now been formally named Snowball by the youngest child, headbutts your leg and demands breakfast. There's a chicken standing on a rake handle like she owns the place. Honestly, she might. You feed them slowly, carefully. You're moving differently now, more deliberate, more tired, more aware of what it took to keep things breathing in a world that wanted everything buried. And here's your historical fact for the day. After the 1888 blizzards, livestock mortality varied wildly depending on geography, housing, and luck. In places where animals were kept close, right against the house or in deep barns lined with hay, many survived. But in places where animals were penned far out or not well sheltered, losses were catastrophic. Some families lost everything, and since many of them lived off milk, eggs and meat from their own animals, that was more than just financial loss. It was food, trade and long-term survival down the drain. Back inside, the kids are dressed, well layered, and chattering for the first time in days. They fight over whose turn it is to sweep the floor, with the broom that's now more stick than bristle. The dog has taken to lying directly on top of the warmest spot by the stove and growling if anyone moves him. You ration breakfast again. There's a rhythm to it now. You make a pot of thin porridge from snowmelt and oats, and stretch it with a little lard for flavour. Not gourmet, but better than eating a boiled button, which at this point feels like it might be on the menu next week. Fringe fact: there's an old rumour, never quite confirmed, that a family in Minnesota once cooked and ate their window curtains during a long freeze. They were made of flour sacks, supposedly soaked in broth, seasoned with soot, and fried on the stovetop like crepes. Did it happen? Who knows? But the idea stuck around long enough to become part of the winter folklore of the Midwest. Eat the curtains became a dark joke, code for we're out of options. You're not there yet. The neighbour stops by again, same one who checked on you earlier in the week. This time he's bringing news. He walks in without knocking, stamping snow off his boots and cradling a folded note like it's made of gold. It's from the town post office, what's left of it anyway. A young boy rode out on snowshoes with updates from the mayor, and he dropped off a few scribbled messages along the way. Yours is short, half of it smeared, but it says enough. Town survived, more storms possible, wait for thaw. You read it 3 times. The kids ask what it says. You simplify, town's still standing, no help yet, but they know we're out here. And that's enough. You spend the afternoon shoveling out the root cellar. You're hoping for preserved carrots, maybe a jar of pickles you forgot about in the back. The snow's packed in tight, but the door opens with some effort, and when you step down into the cool dark, it smells just the way it should. Earthy, fermented, still alive. You find a small sack of onions and a crock of turnips. You feel like you just robbed a bank. Scholarly debate time. Did these root cellars actually preserve food well during blizzards? Some historians say yes. They were naturally insulated, protected underground, and essential to pioneer life. Others point out that if not dug deep enough, or if the entrances were poorly sealed, snow and freezing air could ruin everything inside. Your guess? Like everything out here, it worked until it didn't. That night you have a feast. You add the onions and turnips to the stew. There's still some dried herbs you can sprinkle in, your own mix made back in fall. The kids say it smells like real food. You all eat quietly at first, then louder. Someone laughs and nearly snorts broth through their nose. You tell them to chew slower, but you're smiling too. You sit a little longer around the fire after dinner. No one rushes to bed. The ceiling hasn't creaked as much tonight, and the silence outside is no longer threatening. It feels earned, like the prairie has stopped screaming long enough to let you hear yourself think. The children fall asleep one by one, their breathing heavy and warm. The dog stays curled in his usual spot. You check the fire again, stack a few more logs, and let the heat wrap itself around the walls. You lie down last, as always. But instead of fear, there's a strange feeling crawling over you now, something like hope, or at least endurance. That stubborn kind that says, okay, maybe we can do one more day, and maybe one more after that. The next day begins with the sound you haven't heard in what feels like years. Birdsong, just one. A single cautious chirp from somewhere out near the edge of the yard, like a tiny scout sent ahead to see if the world is still dangerous. You freeze, spoon halfway to your mouth, and listen. There it is again, louder this time. A quick little tweet, then silence, then another. It's almost embarrassing how much it moves you. You set the spoon down, walk to the window and wipe away the fog with your sleeve. The world is still white, still thick and frozen in places, but now there's a bird hopping along the top of a fence post like it owns the place. A little grey thing with a belly like a snowball and legs like thread. You watch it fluff its feathers against the cold and take off, vanishing into the bright blue sky. Spring's still months away, but that bird has plans. Your family's moving slowly this morning. Everyone is, honestly. The kids are sore from shoveling. You've all got dry lips and tired eyes. The fire feels less like a miracle now and more like a roommate. Grumpy, high maintenance, but reliable. It crackles behind you while you put together breakfast. Thin onion broth with scraps of turnip and a small square of fried dough made from your last bit of flour. It's enough. It has to be. But the real ache isn't in your stomach, it's in your head. Because now that the storm has passed, now that the house is held and the barn is still standing, and the worst has probably moved on, there's something else creeping in. Something quieter, but heavier. Grief. You think of the others, the families you haven't heard from, the ones whose windows stayed dark, the ones who didn't make it to the barn in time or lost someone on the trail back from school. You don't know anything yet, but you feel it, like pressure in your bones, like a storm that lingers not in the sky, but behind the eyes. Here's your historical fact. During the Schoolhouse Blizzard of 1888, one of the greatest tragedies was that it struck in broad daylight during school hours. Many teachers, young women in their teens and early 20s, had to decide whether to keep students inside or send them home before the storm hit full force. Some chose right, some didn't. In total, dozens of children died just trying to walk home. You think of that every time your children put on their boots. That morning you decide to walk farther than you have since the storm. It's time to check on the schoolhouse. It's not close, not far exactly. But when you're slogging through waist-high snowbanks with every step trying to swallow your legs, a half-mile feels like a marathon. You rope up again, this time bringing the older boy along. He's strong and quiet, and you can tell he wants to go even if he doesn't say so. You both pack a biscuit in your coat pockets and start walking. The snow isn't soft anymore. It's hardened into a crust, slick and sun-glazed, so your boots crunch loudly with every step. You follow the old fence line. The posts are mostly buried, but a few poke up here and there like crooked teeth. The air is so clear you can see your breath drift for yards before it vanishes. The sky's impossibly blue. It would almost feel like a beautiful day, if not for the graveyard you're trudging through. You reach the schoolhouse just before noon. It's still there, tilted a little, with one shutter blown off and the steps nearly gone under the drift, but standing. You knock, out of habit, then push the door open. Inside, it smells like chalk and wet wood and something old, something frozen. The desks are all still lined up, covered in a soft powder of snow that slipped in through the cracked windows. Someone wrote part of the alphabet on the blackboard, A through K, and stopped there. You wonder if they were interrupted or just never came back to finish. And here's your fringe fact of the day. Some schoolhouses during these blizzards were heated only by tiny wood stoves meant for small rooms. If the fire went out, the temperature inside could drop below freezing in under an hour. Kids would huddle together, wrap their feet in newspaper, or take turns stomping in place to keep circulation going. One teacher reportedly cut up the American flag and used it to wrap a child's frost-bitten hands. Another burned her own wooden desk for heat. You find no bodies here, no horror story, just silence, the kind that sticks to your ribs. You check the back room, it's empty too, but there's a blanket on the floor and a lantern burned down to the wick. Someone made it here, someone waited it out. And maybe, just maybe, they walked home when the sky cleared. You leave the schoolhouse without touching anything. It feels sacred in its stillness, a place full of almosts and maybes. On the walk home, your son finally speaks. Do you think everyone else made it? You look at him. You want to say yes with your whole heart, but instead you say, "We'll find out soon." And that's the truth. That night the house is warm. Not hot, not even really comfortable, but warm. You all sit closer than usual, no chores, no snow tunnel digging or root cellar raids. Just stillness, togetherness. Someone tells a story. It's nonsense. A tall tale about a snow monster with icicle teeth and a beard made of wind. The kids laugh. Even you laugh. It feels strange in your throat, like a language you haven't spoken in a long time. Scholars argue about the emotional toll of these blizzards, whether families bounce back or just look like they did. Diaries are sparse. People didn't always write what hurt, but trauma leaves fingerprints, even in the strongest homes. The jokes got darker. The silences stretched longer. And some kids never looked at snow the same way again. You think about that as you tuck everyone in. About what they'll remember. What you'll remember. Maybe not the cold, not exactly, but the closeness. The creaks in the roof. The taste of lard thick porridge. The feeling of someone breathing next to you in the dark. Proof you weren't alone. Tonight sleep comes more gently, like a friend tapping your shoulder and saying, "It's okay now, at least for a little while. By now you've stopped expecting normal mornings. There's no such thing anymore. Not in the blizzard's long shadow. You've traded the clock for the fire, the calendar for the sky, and breakfast for whatever doesn't require a miracle to cook. But this morning, this one starts a little differently. The kids are already up. That never happens. You wake to the soft scuffle of boots on the floor and muffled giggles echoing off the walls. You hear the clink of the stove door opening, a few quiet words being exchanged, and, most surprising of all, the unmistakable smell of something cooking. You sit up, blink away the sleep, and see your oldest, barely more than a child himself, kneeling by the fire, feeding in small sticks and blowing into the coals with all the confidence of a prairie blacksmith. Beside him is a battered tin pot, and in it, something warm. It's broth, thin as creek water, but it's hot and it's his doing. The rest of the kids are sitting cross-legged nearby like they're in the presence of royalty. You try not to make a big deal out of it, but inside your heart does a small somersault. Because that's how this works now. Tiny acts of resilience, small victories, quietly earned. You sip the broth slowly when it's handed to you, lukewarm, faintly oniony, with a speck or two of whatever was left floating on the bottom. You pretend it's a feast. The kids play along. Someone even clinks their tin cup against yours like it's a toast. Here's your historical fact for the day. Many frontier families told stories to pass the long winter nights, especially after storms. These weren't just bedtime tales. They were survival guides disguised as entertainment. Folk stories, family legends, cautionary ghost tales about wandering too far in the snow, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes completely made up. But they served a purpose, to keep minds busy, hearts calm, and memories intact. And you decide, today's the day to tell one of your own. The fire crackles. The broth warms your belly. The kids lean in. You start. Once, there was a boy who got lost in a snowstorm, and the only thing he had to guide him home was the sound of a bell his mother kept by the fire. You make up the rest as you go, watching their eyes grow wide, watching their hands curl around their blankets, watching the dog sigh dramatically like he's heard better stories from the goat, but they love it. They ask questions. What happened to the boy? Did the snow talk to him? Was the bell magic? Of course it was. They fall asleep in shifts, heads leaning against shoulders, the kind of closeness that would have sparked arguments a week ago. Now, nobody cares. Elbows jab, toes tangle, nobody moves. You sit there for a while in the glow of the fire and your own words and think, we're still here. And somehow, we've found space to imagine again. Fringe fact. There was a widely shared frontier folk tale during the late 1800s about a snow witch who lived in the drifts and fed on warmth. Supposedly, If you stayed too still in the snow, she'd steal the heat from your chest before you could breathe again. Children were told to wiggle their fingers and toes not because of frostbite, but to keep the witch away. Some families even tied bells to gloves and boots, thinking the sound would scare her off. Creepy? A little. But again, stories are how people made sense of things that had no mercy. Later that afternoon you decide to go visit the widow Jenkins. She lives alone in a sod house near the creek and no one's heard from her since before the storm. You dress carefully, not just for the cold, but for what you might find. The trail is tough. The snow has settled into uneven mounds and hard ridges like frozen ocean waves. You follow the wind-carved paths made by neighbours or wildlife. It's hard to tell which. As you get closer, your eyes scan the horizon for smoke, and finally you see it. A thin grey line rising from her chimney. You breathe out. That's all the confirmation you need. She's alive. She opens the door before you knock. Face like cracked leather wrapped in 3 scarves. She stares at you like she's not sure if you're real. Then she nods once and steps aside. Her home is cold, damp, but she has a fire going, and she's wrapped in more layers than you knew a person could wear. She offers you boiled water. No food, but warm. You drink and ask how she fared. Her answer is simple. Didn't die. You stay for an hour, maybe 2. Talk about the storm. Talk about nothing. She says she lost a chicken, but the cow made it. Says she sang hymns through most of the worst nights just to keep her voice from freezing in her throat. And here's the scholarly debate of the day. Historians wonder if women on the frontier, especially those alone, were more vulnerable or more resilient. Records show a startling number of widows, spinsters, and single mothers survived extreme weather events when others didn't. Some say it's because they were used to being prepared. Others say they were simply too stubborn to quit. Either way, they were often the keepers of memory, passing down oral histories when no one else bothered to write things down. Before you leave, you give her half a loaf of bread. She insists she doesn't need it. You leave it anyway. The walk home is strange. You feel lighter, but also heavier. Relieved she's alive, yes, but there's something sobering about how quiet that house was. How close everything feels to the edge. That night, you don't tell a story. You listen. To the fire, to the creak of the house, to the slow, steady breathing of the people you've been keeping warm with your own skin for over a week now. You don't say it out loud, but you think it. We're different now, not broken, not entirely, but changed. In the dark, your hand finds the hand of one of your kids, not tightly, not out of fear, just enough to remind both of you. We're still here. There's a certain kind of hunger that doesn't come from your belly. It creeps up behind your eyes, makes you dizzy when you stand, turns your thoughts foggy and thin, like breath on a mirror. That's the kind of hunger you're starting to feel now. Not starvation exactly, not yet, but a long, slow unravelling. The body whispering that it's been too many days of thin broth, too many meals stretched to the limit, too many potatoes that look more like science experiments than food. This morning you stand too fast and everything goes white. You brace yourself against the wall, let the wave pass and breathe slow. The kids don't notice, or maybe they do, but they've learned not to say anything unless it's urgent. You drink hot water instead of tea. Pretend it tastes like something. Let it warm your fingers, if not your stomach. And then, because it's all you can do, you keep moving. Today's goal is simple. Food. Not rationing, not stretching, but finding, somewhere, somehow, just a little more. You dig through the storage crates again. Nothing new. You check the back corners of the root cellar, poke at suspicious lumps buried under rags, knock on old jars hoping one might be hiding something edible. You find a sack of cornmeal with a hole in it, mouse-sized most likely. There's only enough left for one decent meal. You'll save it, one more day. And then you start thinking strange thoughts, like, What does snow really taste like if you add lard and salt? Could you crush it into ice and make it feel more filling? Or worse, how long before the animals outside stop being just animals? You're not there yet. You don't want to be. But you've read the stories. Everyone has. Here's your historical fact. During severe storms like the Great Blizzards of 1888, many families ran out of supplies before the snow even stopped falling. Trains carrying food and coal were buried or frozen on the tracks. Towns were cut off. General stores ran empty within days. And while rural families were used to living lean, the blizzards pushed them into extremes. Some boiled boot leather, others cooked tree bark. There are documented cases of families grinding dried corn husks into powder to fake flour. So yeah, anything starts to look like a meal if you stare long enough. You gather the kids and decide it's time for a hunt. Not for deer, not in these conditions, but for anything else. Forgotten apples, mushrooms, even berries that might still cling, frozen and shriveled to the brush along the fence line. You split up carefully, always in sight of the house. One child finds a patch of rose hips, dry and bitter but edible. Another spots a half-frozen gourd still clinging to the edge of the garden bed like it refused to die properly. You find 2 turnips in the barn you swear weren't there yesterday. By the end of it, your haul looks pitiful, but it's something. Back inside, you add it all to a stew so thin it barely deserves the name. You flavour it with salt and a crushed clove of garlic you've been hoarding since December. The pot simmers while you all sit nearby, warming your hands and telling lies about what it really tastes like. Smells like roast duck, one kid says. More like beef stew, another chimes in, eyes wide. You nod solemnly. I was thinking cherry pie. You all laugh. Not hard, not loud, but it feels good in your throat. Here's your fringe fact for today. There was a peculiar myth in some frontier communities that eating snow while hungry could steal the heat from your stomach, leading to death. Parents warned their children not to eat it unless it was melted first, believing that the cold would smother the tiny spark of warmth your body still had left. Whether there was any science to it or not, people treated snow like a tricky spirit, not to be trusted on an empty belly, and you believe it. You tell the kids, melt it first, always, and only if we need it. As evening comes, a strange kind of restlessness settles over the house. Hunger makes people quiet, but it also makes them dream. The little one starts talking about strawberries. She says she remembers a day, long ago, when you made shortcakes and let her have 2. You don't remember that day. But she tells the story like it's scripture. Someone else asks if spring will come early this year. Someone else asks if it ever will. You don't have answers, so you reach for stories instead. You pull out a tale from your childhood, about a bear who hibernated too long and missed spring entirely. He woke in July, confused, wandering the forest in a daze, asking every bird if he'd missed the thaw. Eventually he found a wise owl who told him that sometimes waking late was better than not waking at all. The kids seem to like that one. You might have told it badly. Doesn't matter. They fall asleep with that image in their heads. The groggy bear blinking at sunlight he almost didn't get to see. Later, once they're asleep and the house is still, you feel the hunger more sharply. It creeps into your bones, makes your jaw ache, your hands tremble. You know you'll need to make a trip soon. Into town, into the wild somewhere. The food is too low, the risk of waiting too high. You stare into the fire and feel your stomach grumble, then your eyes close, and you dream, strangely, vividly, of a garden, one that never froze. The kind with tomatoes the size of your fists and onions so sweet they tasted like apples. You're pulling carrots from the ground with bare hands, laughing as the sun hits your face. You wake to darkness and the sound of the wind beginning to rise again. Not a storm, just enough to remind you that it could be. You know it's going to be a different kind of day the second you open the door and hear people. Not just wind, not just the creak of old wood or the soft bark of a bored dog. Actual voices. Distant, but real. and not panicked, not yelling, just talking. You step outside, squinting in the pale light, and spot movement at the far end of the road, if you can call it a road anymore. It's half snow, half ice, with the edges spilling into white hills like melting wax. But out there, trudging through it all, are two figures pulling a small sled loaded with crates. You blink once, hard, town. You call back inside, pull on your coat and walk fast enough to make your breath catch. Your boots crunch through the snow, slipping occasionally on the hard crust, and your legs burn by the time you meet them halfway. It's a man and a boy. The man's cheeks are raw, the skin along his jaw scabbed from cold, but his smile is real. The boy looks tired but proud, like this sled run was something he'd been waiting to do his whole life. "We made it," the man says. You shake his hand like he's returned from war. Here's your historical fact. After the blizzard of March 1888 hit the East Coast, many cities were locked down completely for days. New York City was cut off by train, telegraph lines were buried, and supplies didn't move. But after about a week, people began digging by hand. Entire neighborhoods shoveled paths to each other, forming tunnels and trenches. Food and fuel were dragged in on sleds by children, milkmen, and volunteers. These makeshift delivery lines saved lives. In rural areas, similar efforts were made. It wasn't organized, just survival by foot. And now it's happening here. The sled holds bread mostly, a sack of flour, a few glass jars filled with beans and salt. Nothing fancy, but enough to stretch your stores by another week. You don't buy, you trade. A few candles, a leather belt, a piece of embroidered linen your mother made is one of your favourites, but right now, nobody eats lace. The boy with the sled hands you a small pouch of hard candy. "For the kids," he says, grinning like a magician revealing his best trick. You nearly hug him. Back home, the reaction is instant and electric. The children scream when they see the bread. When you break off a hunk and let them each taste it, soft, yeasty, real bread, they act like you've handed them the moon. Then you pull out the candy, one piece each. They hold it in their mouths like sacred treasure, cheeks puffed, eyes closed. The flavour, mint maybe or clove, makes them flinch at first. Then they smile. Even the dog looks impressed. That night's meal is the best in weeks. A real stew, with bread on the side and a little salt to make it sing. You let everyone eat until they're full. No measuring, no counting bites, just warmth and seconds. Fringe fact. In some New York neighborhoods during the 1888 blizzard, children formed candy gangs, roaming bands of kids who raided buried sweet shops or traded bits of molasses, taffy they'd hidden before the storm. One story tells of a boy who dug down through 3 feet of snow into a collapsed corner store and emerged with a fistful of peppermints like he'd found pirate treasure. The desire for sweetness, it seems, survives everything. After dinner you gather by the stove again, but this time the stories feel lighter. Someone brings up that one night in October when the goat got into the apple barrel, or when you burned a pie so badly you had to toss the whole thing, pan and all, into the creek. They laugh. You laugh. There's air in your lungs again instead of dread. But here's the scholarly debate of the day. Some researchers believe these moments of post-crisis joy, the so-called relief bounce, are crucial for mental recovery. That laughter, storytelling and shared meals help people reclaim their experience, file it away under "survived that one." Others argue it's a dangerous illusion, that people celebrate too soon, let their guard down, and suffer when the next hardship hits. You don't know where you stand on that argument, you just know this moment feels good, and you're letting your family have it. That night, when the fire is down to glowing coals and the house settles into its usual wooden size, you lie in bed and feel something you haven't felt since before the snow buried your door. Calm, not confidence, not comfort, but a moment of peace between storms, The kind you earn after everything falls apart and then somehow doesn't. You wake only once in the night, startled by the roof creaking again. But it holds, and you fall back asleep within seconds, your body trusting what your brain can't quite say out loud yet. We might actually be okay. The next morning, you open your eyes to light dancing across the ceiling. Real light, not just that pale smudge you've gotten used to. Actual sunlight, warm gold and moving in slow ripples as if someone's waving a mirror outside. You sit up, confused. Did you sleep longer than usual? The stove is still warm, the fire barely touched. The kids are still snoring in their little quilt cocoons, arms flung out, legs tangled. The dog's belly up in his corner, the picture of absurd confidence. You stand, stretch, and walk over to the window, and there it is. The walls are melting, and not collapsing, not in danger, but melting. The outer snowbanks, once packed tight like coffin lids, are sweating now. Drops of water run in slow motion down the windows, leaving snail trails through the frost. The snow has slumped, sagged. Where it once gleamed with sharp white edges, now it glistens, soft and droopy, like it's finally exhaling. You don't say anything, not at first. You just stand there and stare. Here's your historical fact. The days following the great blizzards of 1888 were marked by sudden, short-lived warm spells. In both the January Plains blizzard and the March East Coast storm, a sharp rise in temperature often followed days of deep freeze. Meteorologists now believe this was due to shifting air masses. Warm air trapped beneath high-pressure zones briefly surged through. It felt like spring. It looked like spring. But it never lasted. You wake the family gently, one by one. No rush, no urgency. Just soft words and a warm hand on a shoulder. When they ask what's happening, you smile and say, "It's thawing." That one word is enough to pull them upright like puppets on a string. Outside, the snowpack still comes up to your ribs, but it's no longer crusty and cruel. It's mushy, wet, the kind that collapses under your feet with a squelch. Everything drips. Icicles fall from the eaves with little clinks. Puddles form in footprints. The sky's still grey, but it has movement now. Clouds shifting fast, like they've remembered they're supposed to go somewhere. You take it all in, blinking like a bear out of hibernation, and then you make a decision. Today, you're airing the house out. You open the front door just a crack, then the back one, then a window, just one, because the snow's still piled high against the others. The air that flows in is cold, but it's fresh, clean. It smells like mud and thaw and possibilities. The kids complain. "It's freezing," they say, bundled in every scrap of clothing they own. But you tell them, "We need new air." And maybe they don't understand, but they stop complaining. You beat out the quilts, shake the dust, hang them up near the door where the breeze can find them. You mop the floor with a rag and melted snow. You dig a trench to the outhouse so no one has to risk falling into a drift with their pants down. You even wipe soot from the windows and let the sunlight pour in like honey. And the moment you're not looking, one of the kids takes off a scarf. Not all the layers, but one. And somehow that feels like a revolution. Fringe fact. In some households after the 1888 blizzards, people took thaw baths. Not real baths, just warm water wipe down sessions with lye soap, done one limb at a time. They called them bucket blessings. In town, barbers offered full shaves to anyone who survived the storm, sometimes free of charge. Getting cleaned up wasn't just hygiene, it was proof. Proof that you were alive and trying to feel like a human being again. You manage your own little thaw bath that afternoon. Heat water in a pot, soak a cloth and wipe down your face, neck, arms. Your skin stings. Your knuckles are raw. But it's the first time in weeks you've touched yourself with care instead of urgency. You even put on a cleaner shirt, one that doesn't smell like smoke and old potatoes. That evening your neighbour stops by again. Same one who brought word from town. This time he's in better shape. hair slicked back, shirt tucked in. He looks like someone who's had a thaw bath of his own. I heard they're opening the rail line, he says. Might be a week or so, but it's coming. You offer him coffee. Weak, barely flavoured water with a hint of grounds. He doesn't complain. He adds a drop of lard to it and swirls it like it's cream. I checked on the Jacksons, he says. They're okay. Lost a pig but made it. You ask about the school teacher. He pauses, then says, she's all right. Lost a few kids out of town, not hers, but she's taking it hard. You nod. That makes sense. Some things don't thaw quickly. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. Some historians believe that these post-blizzard warm spells offered not just physical relief, but emotional recovery. Others argue they were deceptive, temporary lifts that made the next freeze even more unbearable. One letter from 1888 reads, "The sun came out and I wept like a widow, for I knew it would leave me again." Another said, "It felt like God taking off his gloves just to wave hello." You don't know what this is, but it's something. You let the kids stay up later that night. No work, no chores, just warmth and idle chatter. Someone tries to play a tune on a comb and paper. Sounds like a chicken drowning in syrup, but everyone claps anyway. You pull out an old deck of cards and teach them a game they don't understand but pretend to win. It's stupid and loud and completely unnecessary. It feels amazing. Later you close the windows. The house smells different now. Less stale, less burnt, more alive. The blankets still hang by the door, swaying gently in the breeze like they're dancing for joy. You lie down, not because you're exhausted, but because the day feels done. And for the first time in weeks, your sleep is deep and dreamless. No blizzard, no creaking roof, no frostbitten ghost wandering the edge of your memory. Just quiet, just breath, just thaw. You wake before the sun, again. It's becoming a habit now, not out of fear like it used to be, but out of rhythm. You're synced to the stove, to the firewood, to the subtle changes in temperature before anyone else stirs. It's become your quiet hour. Just you, the sound of the stove breathing, and the soft weight of the house still holding together. You sit for a moment, bundled in your patched coat, watching the thin smoke curl out from the stovepipe. You let your thoughts wander, not too far, not into the dark places, just far enough to remember what it felt like before. Before the snow, before the silence, before all of this became your version of normal. You get up gently and start the fire again. The kindling catches easily now. The logs are dry enough, split small enough, and the stove seems to understand what you need. It hums back to life with no argument. You sit close and warm your hands. Your fingertips are still stiff, the skin cracked along the knuckles, but they move. Sort of. You pull off your glove and look closer. The skin there's gone pale, not white, greyish, numb, dull, and spongy. You press down and the colour doesn't bounce back right away. You flex your fingers again, just to be sure, but there's no doubt. Your fingers are frostbitten, not badly. Not like the stories. You haven't turned black or shriveled. You won't lose anything. Probably. But it's there. The silent warning of what this winter has cost your body. Here's your historical fact. In the blizzards of 1888, frostbite was more common than full-on fatalities. Many people survived the cold, only to lose fingertips, ears, noses, or entire toes. Some people had no idea it had happened until it was too late. Frostbite, especially the deep kind, can numb the area so completely that you don't even feel the damage happening. A soldier from an earlier winter once described it as freezing without knowing, dying in bits. You bandage your hand gently. You heat water, soak a rag and press it against the worst parts. Not too hot, you know better than that. Just enough to encourage circulation. You grimace but don't cry out. Everyone's still sleeping. When you finally stand up and move away from the stove, you realise your legs ache even worse. Your thighs feel like someone beat them with a plank. You limp to the door and push it open. Outside, the world is no longer a frozen tomb. It's a soggy battlefield. The snow is melting fast now. The drifts are collapsing into themselves, puddles forming on top of hard crusts. The yard has turned to slush, half mud and half ice. Water runs in strange little rivers along the fence posts. The wind is still cold, but the kind that just pinches your cheeks, not peels your skin off. Then you catch your reflection in the frost-glazed window. You barely recognise yourself. Your beard is speckled with grey. Your face looks chiselled, not in a handsome way, but in a carved-from-fatigue kind of way. Your eyes are shadowed, your lips are cracked, and your nose, well, you're keeping an eye on that too. There's a little grey patch there now. You touch it and wince. Here's the fringe fact of the day. There's a story about a man from Wyoming in the 1880s who lost his entire beard to frostbite. Not his skin, just the hair. It froze so solid during the storm that when he tried to brush the ice out, the whole thing broke off like a brittle hay bale. He walked into a tavern afterward with a perfectly clean-shaven chin and said, "Guess I'm young again." People laughed, then they cried, then they drank. You step back inside and warm yourself up again. The kids are waking now. They shuffle out like zombies, hair sticking out, feet dragging, wrapped in whatever blankets they'd cocooned themselves in overnight. And then you notice your middle boy, the one who never complains, is limping. You ask him what happened. He shrugs, says his toes hurt. You sit him down gently, pull off his boot, then the sock. The sight stops your breath. His toes are purple-blue, dry and waxy. 2 of them have split. The others look swollen and stiff. You wrap them quickly, rubbing the circulation back in, biting your lip so hard you taste blood. You know what this means. You know. But you don't say it. You just wrap them up, layer the socks back on and say, "We'll watch it." He nods, doesn't cry. He knows too. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. Medical knowledge on frostbite in the 1880s was, let's call it, developing. Some doctors believed in rubbing snow directly onto the frozen parts. Others warned that was a death sentence. Some recommended immediate amputation to prevent infection. Others swore that the limbs could be saved with whiskey, prayer, and time. The truth? Depends on who you ask, and how much skin you're trying to keep. You keep your son inside all day. You keep everyone inside. The wet, the wind, the danger of slipping on the slush. It's all too much now. So you stay close to the fire, play card games, tell another story, even sing a little. You check his toes every few hours. You whisper to them like they're fragile things that might be coaxed back into life. They don't look better, but they don't look worse. That night sleep is heavier. The air is thicker now, damp, a little musty. The fire's heat hangs longer in the house. Everyone piles closer, even the dog, who's become less of a watchdog and more of a hot water bottle with legs. You lie awake longer than usual, not because of fear, but because of pain. Your hand throbs, your thighs ache, and your heart. That's sore too, from trying so hard to be strong for everyone else. You don't cry, but you let yourself feel it. The unfairness, the exhaustion, the cold that crept in without permission and decided to stay. You stare at the ceiling and wonder how many other people are lying in the dark right now, nursing wounds they can't quite see, whispering to frozen skin, hoping their bodies remember how to heal. You fall asleep holding your bandaged hand against your chest, willing the warmth to stay, just a little longer. Morning breaks with a faint orange glow on the horizon and the unmistakable sound of dripping. Not just the soft, timid kind, but full-on dripping. Steady, wet, almost musical. It's coming from the edge of the roof, from the barn, from the eaves above the bedroom window. Everywhere, the great thaw has begun. You lie there for a few seconds, flat on your back, letting the sound sink in. It's not just noise, it's a promise. One you don't fully trust yet, but a promise all the same. You sit up. The kids are still asleep, tangled in their usual quilt heap. and the dog's rolled onto his side like someone who lost a long fight with gravity. You step carefully over limbs, gather your coat and boots, and head out the door. Outside, it's like the prairie has shed a layer of skin overnight. The snow is no longer crisp and white. It's dull, pockmarked, crumpling in on itself. Cracks have formed along the edges of drifts. Some of the paths you carved are now rivers. The ground squishes underfoot, a sickly mix of mud and melting ice. It smells different too. Wet earth, rot, smoke from the neighbour's stove. Even the barn smells stronger. The world's waking up slowly, but it's doing so in a soggy, messy sprawl. And then comes your next dilemma. The laundry. You haven't done a real wash since before the storm. Sure, you've wiped and rinsed and hung out the occasional shirt to dry by the fire, but actual washing, soaking, scrubbing? Nope. And now, frankly, the house smells like old boots, smoked meat, and unbrushed teeth. Every child is wearing a rotation of the same 3 garments in a different order. Underwear has become more of a suggestion than a rule. You decide it's time to brave it. You haul out the wooden washtub from the barn, half frozen to the wall, and fill it with snow, letting the stove melt it down bucket by bucket. It takes hours. Your hands go numb just lifting the water. The lye soap is brittle, cracked, and smells vaguely of goat. But you do it. 1 shirt at a time, 1 pair of socks. You scrub until your knuckles sting and your sleeves are soaked. You slap the clothes against a board and mutter curses under your breath, and somewhere in the middle of it, you realise you're not even doing this for hygiene. You're doing it because it feels normal. Because standing over a washtub, fighting grime and cold makes you feel like you're winning, like the world didn't break you after all. Here's your historical fact. During and after the blizzards of 1888, hygiene took a back seat in most households. Water was scarce, frozen solid, or too valuable to waste on washing. Baths were rare, if not impossible. In cities like New York, bathhouses closed due to frozen pipes. In rural homes, wash basins were frozen to the floor. People layered up not just for warmth, but to cover the smell. It was survival over civility. As the day goes on, you set out what you can to dry. Socks stiff as bark, shirts hung over chairs, blankets draped by the fire. The house looks like a laundry camp exploded. Steam hangs in the air, mixing with the smell of soap, wood smoke, and damp wool. It's almost comforting. Almost. And here's the fringe fact. Some frontier folk swore by sleeping without underwear in winter, not for comfort, but for practicality. Underwear took too long to dry. Better to keep it clean and dry for the daytime and sleep in the buff under heavy quilts with others. Your body heat would stay trapped better, and your only clothes wouldn't get damp. It sounds backwards, but honestly, on the coldest nights, it worked. You're not ready for that. Not yet. But you think about it. Later you check your frostbitten fingers. They're stiff, but not worse. No blackness. No creeping rot. You keep them bandaged. Keep them dry. You check your son's toes next. He winces, but not as much. The colour is better. Not good, but better. You rub them with warm oil. He doesn't cry this time. That's a win. The thaw, of course, brings new problems. The melting snow floods the yard. The path to the outhouse turns into a small lake. The trench you dug last week is now a canal. You rig a board to act as a bridge, but it wobbles with every step. One of the kids falls in, comes back laughing, soaked and covered in mud. You should scold them. You don't. Instead, you help them peel off wet clothes and throw them on the steaming pile near the stove. The dog tries to lie on them. You tell him no. He does it anyway. That evening you make a soup thickened with breadcrumbs and laced with the last of the lard. You've never been prouder of a meal in your life. The kids go to bed earlier tonight, tired from stomping through slush and helping move wet laundry. You stay up later, listening. The house sounds different now, not quieter, just changed. The crackle of the fire is gentler, the creaks in the roof are fewer, even the wind outside feels less aggressive, like it's finally finished scolding you and is now moving on to someone else. Here's the scholarly debate for today. Some argue that the emotional recovery after events like the 1888 blizzards happened faster in cities, where people had distractions, shops, work, gossip, and church. Others say rural folks recovered quicker because they had to. No one was coming to help. You didn't have time to dwell. If the cow didn't get milked, or the roof didn't get patched, the next storm would finish what the last one started. You're beginning to understand both sides, and finally you go to bed, cleaner than you've been in days, wrapped in a quilt that smells faintly of soap and smoke. The dog is curled beside you. The kids are breathing slow and deep. You lie on your back and stare up at the ceiling, tracing the same knots in the wood you've stared at all winter. But this time, you see something new. Hope, not loud, not bright, but steady. And for the first time in what feels like forever, you pull off a layer before sleep. Just one. But it's a start. There are a few unspoken rules in a household battered by weeks of snow, ice, and survival. One of them. If you wake up in the middle of the night needing to pee, you think long and hard about how badly you really need to go. Because the outhouse, it's still outside, and no matter how much the snow has softened, no matter how promising the daytime thaw feels, the nights are still brutal. So when it happens, when nature taps you on the bladder and tells you it's time to go, you lie there for a moment, eyes closed, bargaining with your own anatomy. You try to wait it out, you try to sleep through it, but your body is louder than your willpower. So you groan, roll yourself out from the warmth of the quilt pile, and prepare for what might be the worst part of your entire day. There's no dignity in midnight outhouse runs. None. You pull on your boots with frozen fingers, hop around while trying to wedge your legs into pants without knocking over the stove kettle, and grab the small lantern that never seems to hold a charge past 15 minutes. The cold hits you like a slap the moment you crack the door open. Outside, the wind is light but sharp. The stars are terrifyingly bright, cold diamonds flung across black velvet. The moon hangs heavy above the trees, casting hard silver shadows that make everything look too sharp, too quiet. The snow crunches underfoot like you're stepping on broken dishes. You clomp your way to the outhouse, muttering a prayer that no part of your exposed skin will stick to anything. And this is where we get honest. Because here's your historical fact. One of the most overlooked dangers during the 1888 blizzards, particularly for women and children, was the outhouse. More than a few people froze to death just trying to relieve themselves. In some rural areas, the outhouse was 50, even 100 feet away. Wind, snow, and poor visibility turned a 2-minute errand into a one-way trip. Survivors later built indoor chamber pots, or created blizzard boxes, sealed buckets with lids, for emergencies. You didn't build one, yet, but you will. Because right now, with your backside exposed to a breeze that feels like it came off a glacier, you would give anything for a bucket and some privacy indoors. And here's your fringe fact. In some towns, people made outhouse runs a 2-person job. One person held the lantern and kept watch, the other handled the business. This wasn't just for safety, it was to make sure nobody passed out from the cold or got turned around in the snow, especially at night. Some families even tied ropes from the back door to the outhouse so you could follow it in the dark, like a lifeline. Because sometimes it was. You finish as fast as the laws of physics allow and bolt back to the house, heart racing, nose stinging, boots slipping in half-melted slush. You slam the door shut behind you, drop the lantern, and strip off your outer layers in record time. The warmth of the house hits you like a blessing. Not hot, not even really warm, but enough. You swear you'll never complain about chamber pots again. Back under the covers, it takes longer than usual to fall asleep. Not because of the cold, but because your heart is still racing, and because your bladder might be empty now, but your brain is full, still bracing for danger, still caught in survival mode. You think about how silly it is. This tiny moment, this midnight errand, being the thing that almost pushed you over the edge. Not the storm, not the roof, not the frostbite, the outhouse. But that's how it goes, doesn't it? The big things are so big your mind can't even grab onto them properly. But the small things, the frozen pants, the wet boots, the sting of wind where you'd rather not be stung, those add up. Those are the cracks where the cold really gets in. Morning comes, eventually. You wake up groggy, resentful, and a little sore from the midnight dance. But when you sit up, you hear something new. Running water, you freeze, panicked. Pipes? No, there aren't any to burst. Then you remember the trough by the barn. The water is actually moving, trickling from the melting roof, sloshing into the half-buried barrel beside the door. It's not just dripping anymore, it's flowing. Here's the scholarly debate for the day. Some believe the worst part of the blizzards wasn't the snow itself, but the melting. The floods that followed in certain areas, especially in flatter regions, created a second wave of disaster. Ice dams broke, fields flooded, and roads turned to muck. What snow hadn't buried, the water tried to carry away. Some families even lost their homes days after surviving the storm, their foundations crumbling under a sea of thaw. You don't know if that'll happen here, you hope not. But you start planning anyway. You move the firewood farther uphill. You dig new trenches to guide the runoff. You pile rocks and branches to keep the barn from turning into a pool. It's messy, sloppy. You're soaked by the end of it, your socks squelching in your boots, your fingers numb and raw. The kids help where they can. Even your frostbitten son joins in, holding the shovel while you pour runoff into a bucket. His toes are still tender, but he's smiling. That alone feels like a miracle. Later you all sit down to eat a mash of potatoes and fried flour scraps. It's gritty, burnt on one side, but it fills the space where hunger used to gnaw. And that night, when you lie down under your quilts and close your eyes, you feel something strange. You're not scared anymore. You're tired. You're sore. You're down to your last bar of soap and your last nerve. But you're not scared. Because somehow, despite everything, the wind, the cold, the silence, the endless white, you've outlasted it. Not by much, but enough. You're dreaming again. Not about snow this time. Not about the storm or the outhouse or even the roof. You're in a big room with warm wooden floors, oil lamps glowing, someone playing a fiddle off in the corner. There's laughter. Real, loud, easy laughter. People are dancing. You're holding a hot mug of something that smells like cider and cinnamon and safety. Then someone tugs your sleeve. You look down. It's your youngest, smiling wide, holding out a biscuit the size of a saucer. "You drop this," she says, giggling. "You always drop the best ones." Then everything flickers, like a candle in the wind, and fades. You wake slowly, not jolted, not gasping, just peeled out of sleep like an onion's top layer, blinking at the firelight. The house is quiet, not the fearful quiet of a blizzard night, but the restful kind. The dog's tail twitches once in his sleep. The stove ticks softly as it settles. Then you remember, today's the day you check on the sick. You've been putting it off, not on purpose, just quietly avoiding it. You've kept your son's toes wrapped, kept the fire going, kept everyone eating and moving. But now there's something more in the air. Cough, dry, shallow, repeating from the corner. You try to ignore it the first time. Could be dust, could be dry air. But then it comes again and again. Not strong enough to be alarming, but regular enough to make your spine straighten. You know that cough, if you've heard it before. Here's your historical fact. In the weeks after the 1888 blizzards, illnesses swept through households like a second storm. Influenza, pneumonia, bronchitis, croup in children. After days of damp clothes, low nutrition and frigid nights, people's immune systems were brittle. The cold didn't kill them, what came after did. Doctors were few and far between, and even when they could reach you, the medicine of the time was mostly guesswork and grit. You pull yourself up from the quilt nest, knees popping, back aching, and walk over to where your youngest lies curled in her blanket. She's sweating, not badly, not soaking, but enough. You press your hand gently to her forehead, and it's warm. Too warm. Her cheeks are flushed. When she blinks up at you, her eyes look watery, a little glassy. "I'm fine," she says, hoarse. She's lying. You wipe her brow with a damp cloth, make her sip water. You crack open the window just a sliver for fresh air. The warmth you fought so hard for now feels like it might be working against you. You make a tea out of boiled snow, a few wilted mint leaves, and the tiniest shaving of honey you save for emergencies. This qualifies. She drinks it without complaint. You stay by her side most of the day, and in the afternoon, when the fever creeps up higher, you tell the other children it's time for quiet play. You hand them a deck of cards, a paper doll set that's missing half its pieces, the pages of an almanac with some words underlined just because someone once found them funny. Fringe fact: many frontier families used onion poultices, goose grease, or mustard plasters to draw out the fever. Some buried bricks in the coals of the fire, wrapped them in cloth, and set them near the feet or chest. The bricks radiated heat for hours and acted like rudimentary heating pads. You do the same now. Pull a brick from the stove's belly and wrap it in rags, placing it by her feet. She doesn't say much. Just hold your hand while she drifts in and out of sleep. You don't leave her side for hours, not even to eat. That's the thing no one talks about with illness out here. Not just the lack of medicine, but the waiting, the helpless sitting, the holding and watching, listening to every breath, wondering if it's deeper than the last, wondering if that shiver meant anything, wondering how many degrees make a difference when you don't own a thermometer. There's a scholarly debate about just how much damage post-blizzard illness did in rural communities. Records are patchy. Graves went unmarked. Some claim more died from pneumonia in the weeks after the storm than during the storm itself. Others say it's impossible to measure, that the real damage was done slowly, across long nights, in homes like yours, with worried hands and whispered prayers. Your child sleeps fitfully. You sit beside her, adding wood to the stove, swapping the warm brick for another when it cools. You hum old songs under your breath, the ones your own mother used to hum when you were sick. You can't remember all the words, but that doesn't matter. The melody's what heals. You don't get much sleep that night. Your child coughs, sweats, whimpers in her sleep, but she sleeps. That's something. The fire burns low, but you keep feeding it, like it's an offering to whatever power is watching, a bribe, a promise. Take the fuel, leave the child. Morning comes, dragging a pale sun behind it. Your eyes are dry. Your body feels like driftwood. But when she opens her eyes, smiles weakly and whispers, "I'm hungry," you feel something break loose in your chest. You nearly cry. Instead, you hand her a scrap of bread and say, "That's good, eat slow." And she does. And you know, it's not over. It never really is out here. But for now, she's still here, and so are you. You wake to the smell of the dog, not the cozy, curled by the stove, smelling vaguely of cornmeal and ash kind of dog smell. No, this is wet Barney and very much present. Like the dog decided to roll in everything melting outside and then make a bed out of your laundry pile. You groan, roll over, and there he is, tail thumping against the wall like a poorly tuned drum, his tongue hanging out in what can only be described as a smug grin. You consider scolding him, then decide you don't have the energy to argue with a creature who survived the blizzard by sheer charm and thermal inertia. You get up instead, slowly, carefully. Your muscles still ache, but your fingers bend better today. The frostbite's healing. tender and ugly, but healing. And the house feels lighter, not physically, not yet, but emotionally. The air isn't quite so heavy. And your youngest, still asleep, still warm, but not sweating through the blankets anymore. You take that as a win. Outside, the world is a different creature now. The snow isn't white anymore, it's filthy, streaked with soot, debris, animal tracks, and the occasional brownish patch where things, let's just say, melted from the bottom up. The path to the barn looks like a slalom course through puddles. The sled trail is gone. What's left is part river, part pit, and part mystery. Still, you're used to muck now. The world can't surprise you anymore. You dig out your boots, now permanently moulded into your shape, lace them up, and head outside to check on the animals. Here's your historical fact. In many towns after the 1888 blizzard, streets turned to swamps. Urban snow piled 15 feet high had to be shoveled by hand, sometimes wheelbarrowed out to the rivers, dumped into carts, or just left to rot in the sun. Horses drowned in the slush, carriages sank. One New York report describes a horse completely submerged in a snowbank that had turned into a slushy grave. Rural areas fared only slightly better, less volume but no help. You slosh your way to the barn and find your small collection of livestock still miraculously upright. The cows low with that bored "we survived too" energy. The goat butts you in the shin, obviously offended you didn't bring a treat. The chicken sits on a makeshift perch, blinking slowly like she's been watching the world end and is unimpressed. You toss them feed, refill the trough with runoff you filtered through cloth, and try not to slip on the wet hay. The smell is strong now, not sharp and icy, but sour and fermented, like everything stewing in its own history. You step outside and take a deep breath. The scent hits you like a freight train. Rotting snow, mud, wet wood, mould, animal waste, something dead, somewhere nearby. You don't see it, but your nose does. This apparently is spring. Fringe fact. After large-scale melts like the 1888 blizzards, entire ecosystems of smell erupted. People called it the death thaw. Farmers reported finding animals frozen under drifts. Horses, sheep, the occasional dog. Even entire wagons were discovered weeks after the storm, preserved in snowbanks like pickled time capsules. One man in Kansas found his milk cart fully intact under 8 feet of snow, and his horse inside it, still in harness. Back home, you scrub the floors. Again, the water you boil is full of grit. You strain it through cloth, stir in some old soap shavings, and scrub like you're trying to erase winter itself. The kids help where they can, even the sick one, sitting up now, sipping broth, looking less like a ghost and more like a grumpy raccoon in a bonnet. You let her have extra bread. She's earned it. Midday, the neighbour drops by. Again. This time he brings news. They're digging the road to town. You almost don't believe him. But he says it again, grinning wide. 12 men and 2 mules working since dawn. It's going to take a week, maybe 2. But they're doing it. You feel your knees wobble. It's not just the idea of going to town, it's what that means. Supplies, letters, news, medicine, people, the future. And here's the scholarly debate of the day. Historians argue about how isolated families truly were after the blizzards. Some say communities sprang into action fast, building makeshift roads, organising food convoys. Others argue that isolation lasted weeks, even months, and that survivors simply stopped recording it. Diaries trail off, letters go unwritten, the silence stretches. You don't know who's right, but you know this. If there's a way out of this valley, even a muddy, mule-powered one, you'll be the first to walk it. That afternoon you finally write a letter. It's short, simple, folded once and sealed with wax from the candle stub you've been saving for emergencies. You don't write about the fear, or the frostbite, or the outhouse trip that nearly ended in tragedy. You write, "We're alive. The house held, the animals made it. We lost nothing but time, sending love. Hope you're warm," that's enough. You tuck it into the neighbour's coat pocket and ask him to pass it along when the road clears. He nods. "You need anything else?" You think for a moment. Then you say, "Matches, and if they've got it, peppermint candy." He laughs. "I'll see what I can do." That night the air is humid inside. Not warm exactly, but wet. That spring damp that sticks to the skin and makes everything smell like a root cellar. But the fire crackles, the children sleep easily, and the roof doesn't creak at all. You lie down beside them and watch the shadows dance across the ceiling. You think about town, about letters waiting, about things you'll need. Flour, sugar, maybe even soap with actual scent. And you think, we made it through the blizzard. Now we just have to make it through the mud. You don't talk about it out loud, not in front of the kids, not even in your own head for too long. But still, it crosses your mind more than once now. The blizzard baby boom. There. You said it. Not out loud, not on paper, but in the quiet mental hallway where your secret thoughts hang around in bathrobes, drinking cold coffee and raising their eyebrows at you. Because here you are, weeks past the storm, still stuck under the same roof with the same people, your partner included. And while the blizzard brought fear and frostbite, and the haunting reality that your roof could have collapsed at any moment, it also brought stillness, togetherness, silence. And at a certain point, after the house stops leaking, after the kids are asleep, after the fire is low but steady, you find yourselves lying next to each other in the dark with nothing else left to say and nowhere else left to go. And the body, that stubborn animal, doesn't care much about timing. Here's your historical fact. Following major weather events, especially blizzards and floods, there's often a documented rise in birth rates 9 to 10 months later. After the 1888 blizzards, local records from rural areas and small towns across the Midwest and Northeast show a curious little bump in births. Not huge, not a tidal wave, but enough to make the census takers go, "Huh." They didn't have Netflix in 1888, or podcasts, or even reliable reading light past sundown. And when survival mode simmered down into survival boredom, many folks turned to the one comfort that didn't require electricity, fresh ingredients, or clean clothes. You don't know if that'll be you, but you're not ruling it out. Fringe fact. There were entire columns in the local papers that joked about it. Storm-born babes, they called them. Drift babies. One anonymous letter to a local editor in Kansas in 1889 read, "We survived the snow by staying warm the best way we knew how. Expecting a bumper crop this fall, and I don't mean corn." You imagine someone snorting into their pipe when they read that. The thing is, you're not just thinking about babies because of biology. It's deeper than that. You've watched your kids these past few weeks grow older in front of your eyes. The way your oldest now checks the fire before bed. The way the littlest wraps up the dog when the wind starts to pick up. The way they move, quieter, quicker, more aware of the space they take up. Like little animals adapting to a wilder world. And it makes you wonder, what kind of world are they growing into? What kind of world would another child inherit? That night, after everyone is settled and the embers glow a rich orange in the stove, you and your partner sit close together, knees touching. No words, just warmth. You pass a mug between you, some weak herbal tea made from foraged pine needles and melted snow, and you sip in silence. Eventually they lean their head on your shoulder, and yeah, maybe you do think about how many months it is until fall, but you also think about what it means to survive like this, together. The kind of bond that comes not from choice, but from endurance. From sharing the same cramped bed, the same ladle of soup, the same whispered prayers in the night. It's intimacy, sure. But not the romantic kind you read about. It's gritty, rooted, real. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. Social historians argue over whether harsh winters like 1888 brought families closer or drove them quietly mad. Some diaries from the time speak of strengthened marriages, deeper understanding, and what one woman called the kind of love that only grows in bad soil. Others talk about isolation, cabin fever, even divorce. People who couldn't look each other in the eye after weeks of silence and suffering. Which was more common? Depends on who's telling the story, and whether they stuck around long enough to write it down. You glance across the room, the kids are snoring. One has a foot sticking out of the quilt like a flag of surrender. The dog is tucked under someone's arm like a teddy bear. And you? You're tired. Your back aches. Your feet still smell like mildew even after that wash. But you feel something beneath it all. A hum. A warmth that has nothing to do with the fire. The idea that somehow, against the odds, your little home didn't fall apart. Not just the walls, but the family inside them. You don't say anything sentimental. That's not your style. You just reach over, gently squeeze your partner's hand, and let the silence stretch between you like a blanket that finally covers every corner. In the morning, the kids ask if they can go sledding. You almost laugh. But you look outside, and sure enough, there's still enough snow on the hill, enough crust to hold them, enough sun in the sky to make it feel like something close to joy. So you nod. Take the little sled. Stay where I can see you. They tear out of the house like it's the first day of summer. You watch them slide, tumble, shriek with laughter. And maybe, just maybe, you imagine doing this again in a few years. Another little one bundled up, wobbling after the bigger ones, cheeks pink, nose running, heart full. You don't know what the future holds, but you do know one thing. The house has room, and so does your heart. The wind is back tonight. Not the furious kind. Not the blizzard howling through your teeth kind. No, this is the slow, prowling sort. The one that sighs against the window panes like a reminder. Like it's clearing its throat just to let you know, I'm still here. You don't panic. You don't even tense up, not like before. But you do lie a little flatter under the quilt. Your ears sharpen. Your breath slows. Because after weeks of snow and cold and ice, your body reacts to wind the way a rabbit reacts to the shadow of a hawk. Instinct, residual, deep in the bones. You get up quietly so as not to wake the others. You move through the house like a shadow, testing the latches, checking the stove damper, putting your hand to the walls to feel for cold leaks. The dog watches you from his pile of rags, blinking slowly. He doesn't follow you this time. He knows the drill. Here's your historical fact. During and after the great blizzards of 1888, many families developed what later generations would describe as storm nerves, a chronic tension, sleeplessness, a habit of waking multiple times per night to check the fire, the roof, the door. Some survivors described hearing phantom winds even on calm nights, a kind of seasonal paranoia born from having once been caught completely off guard. They'd sleep light for the rest of their lives. You don't think it'll last forever, but tonight you can't help it. You sit down by the window and look out. The moon is dim behind a veil of clouds. The snowbanks are sinking now, their edges curled inward like they're folding themselves away. Trees sway gently. A few dry branches tap the siding. Tock, 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 like skeletal fingers knocking for attention. You sip from your mug of half-warm water and think, what would I do if it all started again? It's not likely. The worst of winter has passed. The river's flowing again, roads are clearing, but still, you run the drill in your head. How much wood do you have left? How quickly could you board the windows? Could you live off half rations again? Could you stomach the fear? Fringe fact. After 1888, some families never slept with both partners in deep sleep again. One would stay lightly awake while the other rested. They called it keeping watch, a term more often used by soldiers than parents. Sometimes it was the man, sometimes the woman, Sometimes they'd alternate, but someone was always half awake, because trust in the weather had been broken, permanently. You try not to let that happen to you. You tell yourself the wind is just wind, but you still light the second lantern, just in case. The children sleep like rocks, bless them. They're finally past the point of starting awake at every creak in the wall. Even your youngest, recovered now, lies draped across a pillow like a queen without a care in the world. Still, you leave the bedroom door open a crack, and you watch the fire longer than usual before letting it burn down to coals. You don't even really notice when your partner joins you. Just the soft creak of the floorboard, the quiet rustle of another body settling beside yours. They don't speak either. Just pass you a second blanket and sit with you while the wind slides past the house, brushing its fingers across the shutters like a bored spirit. The debate of the day? It's a quiet one. Some historians say the psychological toll of events like the blizzards of 1888 was never truly measured, never recorded properly. People didn't write about anxiety or nightmares or the constant sense that nature had turned against them. They just moved on, or tried to. Others argue that the trauma is there. You just have to read between the lines, in the way letters become less joyful, in the tone of diary entries that turn from storytelling to list-making, in the silence where there used to be music. You sit in that silence now, not because you're afraid, but because you remember, and remembering has weight. Eventually you do go back to bed. You blow out the lantern, check the stove one more time, and slide under the quilt. The dog noses your foot once and settles in at the bottom of the bed. Your partner shifts closer, a knee brushing yours. No words, just presence. You fall asleep not all at once, but in stages. First the hands relax, then the breath deepens, then finally the mind lets go. But somewhere in the corner of your brain you're still listening. Still waiting, not out of panic, just preparedness, just in case. Because once you've survived the kind of storm that knocks the world off its axis, you never sleep quite the same again. You sleep with one ear on the wind, and somehow that's enough. The road is open, you hear it from the neighbour's boy who comes skidding down the slushy trail in a mess of boots, mud, and raw excitement, shouting before he even hits the yard. They cleared it. The main road's clear. At first, you blink at him like he's speaking a different language, and in a way he is. Because road doesn't mean what it used to. It isn't cobbled or smooth or dry. It's not something you glide down in a wagon without thought. Now, road means possibility, mud, effort, but mostly freedom. You hurry outside, pulling your coat on as you go, and sure enough, when you climb up to the top of the path and squint east toward the ridge, there's a gash in the snow leading into the trees. It's jagged and narrow and full of ruts, but it cuts through. It's the first path out you've seen in weeks. Here's your historical fact. After the great blizzards of 1888, roads didn't reopen with fanfare. They reopened with shovels. In small towns and rural farms, men and boys walked ahead of wagons, clearing bit by bit, mile by mile. Sledges were replaced by wagons outfitted with chains or rough wheels. Horses struggled through mud, and what snow didn't melt was packed down by repetition. It took weeks for travel to resume fully, but for many families, even a narrow pass was enough to feel reconnected to the world. You run back down the path, breath fogging in the warming air, and announce it to the family. The road's open. Your partner looks up from stirring a thin cornmeal mush. Really? You nod, grinning, and suddenly the house feels smaller, excitable. Even the dog spins in a tight circle, like he knows something big just changed. The kids ask if you're going to town, not when, if, because they know the trade. Leaving means taking a risk. The roads may be open, but not safe. Melted snow means mud. Melted ice means broken branches, flooded creeks, and the occasional hidden sinkhole waiting to ruin your ankles, but you say yes, because you need supplies. And more than that, you need confirmation that the world is still spinning outside your patch of snow. You prepare carefully, you lay out dry socks, wrap your fingers, pack a small pouch of trade goods, a leather belt, 3 beeswax candles, the last jar of pickled onions. You pause at the door, glance back. Your partner hands you a folded scrap of paper. Letter, they say. You nod. There's a pause before you leave, the quiet kind, the kind that sits heavy. Because even now, this journey to town isn't just an errand, it's a test. Fringe fact. Some families developed what was called a runner's ritual, superstitions or routines before a trip to town during post-blizzard weeks. A kiss on each cheek, a coin in the boot, tying one glove with a double knot. One man reportedly never left without tapping the stove 3 times to wake the spirits. You don't have a ritual, but you do take one last look around and you say, back by nightfall. You set off on foot. The first mile is rough. The trail is narrow, rutted by sleds and foot traffic, slick in places where the sun hasn't quite reached. Trees lean overhead, shedding snow like lazy ghosts. Water pools in ditches. You move carefully, slowly. But there's colour again. The sky is pale blue, not that storm-swollen grey. The evergreens aren't just outlines, they're green. And somewhere, faint but sure, you hear a bird. You almost cry. It's not a dramatic trip, but it's strange. Like walking through a world that's been half erased. Fields that once stretched white and endless are now patchy and brown. Snowbanks lie slumped over fences like lazy beasts. Frozen creeks are cracking open. The land is leaking back into itself. You pass another traveller on the trail. You nod at each other without stopping. That's all. Just a look. But it says everything. You make it to town in 3 hours. 3 muddy, foot-numbing, glorious hours, and it hits you like a slap. The town is alive. People are out. Not many, but enough. Steam curls from chimneys. The general store is open. The church bell chimes. Children run down the street in boots too big for them. Someone is hanging laundry from a 2nd-story window. You pause outside the store, heart thudding, throat dry. You step inside and the smell hits you first. Coffee, dust, soap, cheese, paper. You breathe it in like salvation. Here's your scholarly debate. Some historians argue that post-Blizzard commerce created a sort of mini-boom in remote communities, that the first trade after isolation was electric, more emotional than economic. Others say no, it was desperation, not excitement. That people arrived dazed, quiet, tight-fisted. The truth? Probably both. You trade your goods, you get matches, lard, 2 small tins of beans, a bundle of dried apples that smell faintly of cloves, and, yes, peppermint candy, only 5 pieces. You hand over a precious candle for it. Worth it. You mail the letter. You stare at the board of posted news, a few telegrams, some scribbled updates. Storms in the east. Rail lines delayed. City death toll revised upward. It's sobering, distant, and somehow you feel lucky. On the walk back, your load heavier and your heart a little lighter. You think about what you'll say when you return. What you'll show them. How their eyes will go wide at the candy. How your partner will sniff the lard and nod, quietly satisfied. You cross a melted ridge. Your boots squish in a patch of muddy grass. There, sprouting up through the thawed earth, is the first blade of green you've seen since the blizzard hit. Not a flower, just a weed, but it's alive, and so are you. You step through the door and the smell of home smacks you right in the nose. Wood smoke, boiled potatoes, wet socks. Someone burned something. You can tell from the lingering bitterness in the air, sharp like charcoal, but you don't care, because you're home. The dog is the first to notice. He rockets across the floor like a hairy cannonball, tongue out, claws skidding. The kids aren't far behind. They pile onto you before you're even fully inside, voices overlapping, tugging at your coat, eyes darting to the sack in your hand. Did you get candy? Did you see town? Did you talk to Mr. Riley? Did you fall in the mud? Yes, yes, no, and almost. You barely get your boots off before your partner pulls you into the kitchen and wraps their arms around you. It's not a passionate embrace. There's no swelling violin soundtrack here. It's a tight, grounded, forehead against forehead kind of hug. I kept the fire going, I kept the kids alive, and I missed you more than I'll ever say out loud kind. You hand them the sack, they peek inside. Their eyes go wide at the laird and the apples. Their expression doesn't change when they see the candy, but their mouth twitches just enough for you to catch it. Later, after supper, which is lumpy and weirdly spicy thanks to your middle child's experiments with dried onion skins, you pass out the peppermint candy, 1 piece each, wrapped in wax paper, tiny hard discs of sugar and red stripes that for just a moment feel like treasure. They hold them like holy relics. Your youngest even sniffs hers first, eyes wide, reverent. You tell them to make them last. They don't. You watch as they let the candy melt slowly on their tongues, eyes closed, cheeks puffed, hands folded over their laps like they're in church. Here's your historical fact. Peppermint, among other hard candies, was often sold in general stores during the 1880s and was considered both a treat and a digestive aid. After the 1888 blizzards, when supplies were low and spirits were lower, even the simplest sweets took on massive emotional significance. Families shared them like talismans, proof that the world outside hadn't completely dried up and blown away. You sit by the fire that night, feet bare, the smell of melting snow dripping from coats strung near the stove. Everyone's full. The wind has died down. The air is damp, but not bitter. The storm is finally behind you. And that's when the realization hits. You don't have to sleep tonight. Not like you used to. No one's going to freeze in their sleep. The fire won't go out in an hour. The roof isn't threatening to collapse. There are no blizzard ghosts knocking on the walls or coyotes howling outside the barn. You're safe. But instead of feeling relief, something strange happens. You can't sleep. You lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide, mind spinning. Because safety's a weird thing. When it's gone, all you can do is claw your way toward it. But once it's back, sometimes it doesn't feel real. You sit up, walk to the window, look out. The moon is high again, but this time it's bright and soft, casting silver light on the sagging snow. The trees creak gently. The yard looks like a muddy battlefield in some places, but it's your battlefield, and you won. Then you notice movement out by the road. At first, your breath catches. Old instincts flare up. You blink, squint. But it's just a figure walking with a lantern, bundled tight, hat pulled low. A neighbour. Maybe someone from the other side of the valley, heading home from town. You watch them pass. They never look up, never notice you. You wonder what they've been through. Here's your fringe fact. Newspapers in 1888 began printing more personal stories in the weeks after the storms. Gone were the sweeping weather stats and train line updates. In came stories of near death, heroic rescues, or just plain weirdness. One man survived 3 nights in a hayloft by eating dried apples and singing hymns to keep awake. A woman in Iowa reportedly gave birth in a snowdrift with only her husband and a pocket knife. These tales weren't just entertainment, they were therapy, shared proof that people had lived through something real. You head back to bed, finally. Not because you're tired, but because your bones tell you the worst is over. You settle in, quilt up to your chin, toes still warm from the brick you tuck near the foot of the bed. But sleep doesn't come right away, and you realise for the past few weeks your body has been doing all the work. Now your mind is catching up. All the things you pushed down, the fear, the near misses, the cold burned skin, The way your child looked on the worst night. Those memories drift in now. They float like snowflakes, land soft, melt slow, and you let them. You don't push them away. Because survival isn't just about getting through the storm. It's about making sense of what you just lived through. There's a scholarly debate about this too. Some argue that rural families of the 1800s were emotionally hardened, that they didn't suffer trauma the same way we do. That loss and disaster were just part of a life. Others say that's a myth, that people suffered, they just didn't have the language to name it. They processed through prayer, through silence, through work, through stories told by firelight, through candy shared when words didn't help. You turn onto your side. The fire flickers low now, a soft red glow in the belly of the stove. The kids breathe deep and even. You smile into the pillow and finally you feel it. Sleep, not fear sleep, not collapse sleep, but real, slow, sinking down into peace sleep. The kind you forgot existed. And maybe, if you dream tonight, it won't be of blizzards. Maybe it'll be of spring. Morning creeps in like a cat, quiet, curious, unwilling to commit. The light on the walls is soft and pink, brushing across the boards like it's trying not to wake anyone too quickly. You roll over, stretch, and, without even thinking, reach one foot out from under the quilt, and it's fine, cool, but not biting. Not that frantic, toe-snatching chill that once made you sleep like a burrito in fear of losing a limb to the air. Just morning. You sit up slowly. Your joints protest a little, but not because of cold, just because you've aged 10 years in one winter. You take it as a badge of honour. The fire's burned low, but the house holds its warmth. You stoke the embers into a fresh flame with practised hands, and as the kettle starts to hum, the kids begin their morning rustling, blankets shifting, floorboards creaking, a sleepy voice muttering something about dreams and goats. You let them sleep a little longer. You sit in your chair by the stove, sipping weak pine needle tea, and you listen. To nothing. Well, not silence exactly. There's the whistle of steam, the creak of wood, the occasional thump from the rafters where some snow still melts and drops. But not the hum of tension, not the sound of a house holding its breath. It's a good kind of nothing. Then, from the door, a knock, not frantic, not cold wind pounding or desperate fists, just a few steady raps. You open it to find your neighbour again, same coat, same smile, but this time he's holding a letter. You take it with slow fingers, your heart speeding up before you even read the name. It's from your sister, dated 3 weeks ago, and it's travelled through 4 towns, 2 supply sleds, and 1 mule with a bad attitude. You sit down right on the stoop and read it, barely feeling the chill in the wood. She's alive. Her family too. They lost part of the barn, but the livestock made it. They even hosted a stranded traveller during the worst night, a school teacher who now eats dinner with them every Sunday. You smile, laugh even. You hadn't realised how tightly your chest had been wound. Here's your historical fact. Letters after the 1888 blizzards were often delivered in strange roundabout ways. With trains halted and roads impassable, mail was carried by horseback, sled, or even snowshoes. Entire communities went without news for weeks. When letters did arrive, families read them aloud at the dinner table, sometimes multiple times, just to hear the voices they missed. You bring the letter inside, read it again for the children, and place it in the wooden box where you keep the important things: birth records, dried flowers. The tooth one child swears was knocked out by a vengeful squirrel. After breakfast, you go outside with a shovel, not because you need to dig, but because it feels wrong not to. You dig a trench around the barn. You clear the melting snow off the stacked wood. You rake slush away from the house's foundation. It's not necessary anymore, but it's what you've done every day since the blizzard. The earth is soft beneath the crust, smells like wet moss and last year's leaves. You take a deep breath. It fills your lungs differently now. Out near the tree line, the kids are playing again. Their sled is mostly useless now, drifting sideways down a muddy slope, but they're laughing like it's the best ride of their lives. Even the sick one, who's still sniffling but red-cheeked and full of energy again. And then something strange. You hear a rooster. You don't have a rooster. You follow the sound around the barn and discover one standing on your woodpile, looking deeply self-important. Where he came from, you have no idea. He clucks once, stares at you, then flaps his wings like he owns the place. Fringe fact. After the blizzards, lost livestock wandered across states. Farmers would report pigs showing up in someone else's town, or chickens hitching rides in supply wagons. One man found a cow 3 weeks later, standing on a frozen lake and mooing like it had just woken up from a long nap. Many animals were adopted on sight. You look at the rooster and think, all right, you live here now. You name him Percival. 'Cause why not? Back inside, you begin making plans. Actual plans. Inventory the pantry, sharpen the axe, sketch out the spring garden. You and your partner talk about trading for more seeds. Maybe getting an extra barrel of salt while prices are still low. Maybe, travelling east to see family in late summer, if the roads hold. You find yourself thinking beyond today. That's the biggest shift of all, the scholarly debate. Some say survival makes you live only in the moment, that when the danger is constant, you stop thinking about the future. Others argue the opposite, that hardship breeds vision, that imagining a better tomorrow is what pulls people through the worst. You think both can be true. You survive by thinking only about firewood and stew and quilts. But now, you start dreaming again. You spend the afternoon teaching the kids how to carve simple tools. Your youngest makes something between a spoon and a weapon. You tell her it's perfect. That night, as the sun sets in long golden beams across the room, you lie in bed with the window cracked open just an inch. Just enough to let in the spring air. Smells like melt. Like thaw, like the earth turning over under the snow. You whisper a thank you, not to anyone specific, just to the moment. Then you close your eyes and sleep. A full, undisturbed, real sleep. You survived. You made it. And tomorrow, you begin again. So now the house is quiet. The fire is out. The wind has moved on to other towns. And you finally are allowed to rest without listening for footsteps or collapse, or wolves in the dark. You can breathe deep and dream about planting things, about fixing things, about a rooster named Percival who may or may not be magical, about how peppermint candy tastes when you've nearly forgotten sweetness exists, and maybe, just maybe, about the next winter, but only for a second. Because right now, you're safe, you're warm, you're home, and that is more than enough. Sleep well.